call the meeting to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Bob? Here. Brandy? Here. Jay?
Here.
Taylor?
Here.
Jeff?
Here.
Mark?
Here.
Chelsea? Here.
Okay, we have a full assembly today with Member Trimbley calling in, so it's now time for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, that brings us to the next item on today's agenda, which is approval of minutes. There's only one set of minutes for approval, and that's from the October 21st, 2019 meeting. I'll entertain a motion to do so.
So, second.
Okay, motion's been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Lim. All those in favor of approving those minutes, say aye. Aye. Okay, and one thing I'm going to add, before we move any farther in the meeting, Member Borough needs to leave the meeting at 2:30, and Member Greger, if it goes this far, Stan Greger, excuse me, at 3:50. So it's a long agenda, so we might have to take a break and let them leave the meeting. Okay, item 4, amendment and approval of the meeting agenda for today. I'd entertain a motion to approve the meeting agenda today as presented.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I'd like to amend the agenda under council discussion item 17G. I'd like to talk about tariffs and trade in relationships to Petersburg.
You want to add an E?
Or G, whatever it is, G or E.
Under communications or
Council discussion item.
Okay, Debbie, will you remind me when we get there?
Yep, I'll try.
Okay. So, is there any other amendments to today's agenda? So we're going to add the one item that Member Mucci wanted to add, if there's no opposition to that. If so, state so now. Otherwise, say aye if you want to move forward as amended.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so that brings us to public hearings. There's a public hearing for ordinance 2019-13, and that's an ordinance adjusting the fiscal year 2020 budget for known changes, which is changing the amount on a bid for a pump station in Scow Bay. So is there anyone in the audience that would like to participate in this public hearing? Okay, seeing no hands coming up, that public hearing is now closed. Bid awards, there are none today, so that brings us to item 7, and that is persons to be heard with items related to today's agenda. Is there anyone that would like to speak to items on today's agenda? Okay, we'll start over here. Step forward, state your name, who you represent, and we are going to have a 5-minute limit.
My name is Richard Burke. I represent myself. I'm speaking to 17D. I support Nancy Strand for her interests, planning and zoning. I think she'd be a really good fit. 15E, EMS fire position. I'd like to see that position filled. And 15F, police sergeant position. I'd like to see that filled as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Anyone else? And we'll just move back. And Rexanne, I guess you were the next hand I saw up on this side of the room. We'll work from the left side of the room to the right side as I see the room anyway.
Good afternoon, you guys. My name's Rexanne Stafford, and I'm an EMT with the fire department. I have been for the last 27 years. And I really just wanted to say that, in my personal and professional opinion as an EMT, I feel it's the council's responsibility to put the safety of this community first before anything else. Safety has to come first. I also feel that we have 2 very reliable department heads, Sandy Dixon and Jim Kerr, and both of them feel these positions are necessary, and I just strongly urge you, the council, to back them on these decisions and support them. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stopey?
My name is James Stolpe. Here representing myself, but I would like to speak on 15E and 15F, and I concur with what Rexanne said, that Life safety is important to the community, and above all, that's what we need to strive for. And so I would appreciate if you would support both these positions by voting yes when it comes around to filling them. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you for your testimony. Anybody else on this side of the room that would like to testify? Okay, anybody on this side? Anybody else have an issue they'd like to talk about today that is related to items on today's agenda?
My name is David Beebe. I'm representing myself. The Tongass National Forest leadership has a serious, ongoing, unresolved credibility problem. The agency now pushing for the elimination of the roadless rule has recently been found by a judge to be evading the National Environmental Policy Act and the most recent timber sale right out of the starting blocks on Prince of Wales Island. By extension, identical evasions of NEPA exist in the Central Tongass project. You will recall the Petersburg and Horn Bay Ranger districts also egregiously violated NEPA in both the Tonka and Big Thorn projects. The cost for not following NEPA prescriptions was at a minimum a $4 million loss to the regional economy. Keep in mind now, this was not determined by the courts. This was determined by the agency investigating itself. When the Washington Office Activity Review's investigation team barely makes a blip on our news radar, then fails to show up on the radar of local government, that's when we know our radar of public trust in a public agency managing public resources is terribly broken. Amber Lynn claimed the findings of agency investigation of the Tongass were, quote, just one side of the issue. So exactly what is the other side? We've been waiting for the other side after several requests for at least 3 years. Member Lynn has refused to answer my question. When he served as Stickeen Area Supervisor, I found a document confirming he was at his post in 1987. Ketchikan Area Supervisor Michael Lunn officially reported large-scale theft since his arrival in 1988. I spoke with him for over an hour on the phone earlier this year. He said his internal whistleblowing of large-scale timber theft led to the most miserable experiences of his entire Forest Service career for him and his family. These included veiled death threats and the end of a long-term friendships with fellow agency line officers on the Tongass. The Stickeen Area Supervisor, serving at the time, at the same time as Michael Lunn, had an entirely different experience. He was promoted to Director of Forest Management in Washington, D.C. The problem for many of us is how are we to trust the same agency officials that have violated NEPA in the last 4 timber sales when it has yet to officially explain its maladministration in the first 2, resulting in millions of dollars of losses? There are many reasons why a Petersburg Borough resolution should be unanimously passed in support of keeping the Tongass roadless rule intact, just as it was unanimously passed in Skagway Borough. Among these reasons is the agency has yet to demonstrate it is capable of managing anything in the public interest with such a history of institutional contempt for the National Environmental Policy Act and disregard for federal contract laws and agency regulations. The Petersburg Borough request for an audit remains ignored. The contracting officer at the center of both the Tonka and Big Thorn timber sales has been promoted to district ranger. That's the agency's answer to the Borough's request for an explanation of these matters. For these reasons and many more, please support the roadless rule. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else in the audience that would like to testify to items on today's agenda this night?
Good afternoon. My name is Becky Knight. I encourage you to support the no action alternative, oh, that's a little too big, for the draft Tongass roadless EIS. Last week, in anticipation of this appearing on the agenda, I sent you a sampling of 3 pertinent pieces. One was from the Taxpayers for Common Sense, who found that in total, the Forest Service has lost approximately $600 million over the last 20 years, or $30 million per year on average. And they could end up losing more than $180 million in the Tongass over the next 4 years. In short, the Trump and Dunleavy administrations are enablers of a destructive timber industry that is less than 1% of the regional economy and has already caused a massive 7-decades-long drain on the public's financial resources. Costs associated with this proposed exemption are just another unaccounted for subsidy to the industry. Another piece from 2 highly respected wildlife biologists who have spent their careers on the Tongass wrote, 7 decades of high grading has dramatically depleted the Tongass forest's largest 4 to 10 feet in diameter old-growth trees. And those rare old-growth stands provide some of the most valuable fish and wildlife habitats on the Tongass. In fact, support of an intact roadless rule has been overwhelming, both regionally and nationally. Over the years, the roadless rule was the subject of 600 public hearings, received an avalanche of strong support of over 1 million public comments, and had the backing of hundreds of natural resource specialists, all of whom wanted the Tongass included in the rule. Since 2017, in total, 17 public scoping meetings were conducted in 16 locations, with nearly half of all Southeast Alaska communities represented. 14 of the 16 localities, including those in this packed room last year, right here, affirmed support for the Tongass rule, a roadless rule. During the latest round of public input for the proposed exemption, just over 144,000 entries were received, and the majority opposed changing the rule for Alaska. Most recently, the sovereign tribes of Alaska's southeast, 16 tribal entities, and Skagway's Borough Assembly unanimously endorse the roadless no-action alternative. Directly related to the push to gut the rule are the results of the high-level 2016 Forest Service review of 2 local timber sales. I say this because the agency has absolutely no business embarking on major timber projects or massive changes to Tongass land use designations for the timber industry until they can prove that the 18 formal findings of malfeasance identified in the review have been corrected. As evidenced by records requests, there have been no such evidence. Or there has been no such evidence. This topic has come before your body 8 to 9 times now, beginning almost 2 years to the day since I first addressed the Assembly about it, and almost 1 year to the day since substantive Assembly action was stymied based on hearsay advice that the results of an internal, so-called independent audit of the review was imminent. Despite prompting by the Borough Clerk, it took the agency 5 months to respond to the Assembly's letter of inquiry, which you sent them last November, or which the body sent them last November. I realize some people are new. When they finally responded, they wrote, quote, "A team of auditors are preparing a comprehensive program review of the timber program, and that they look forward to sharing any actions aimed to address any findings identified by the audit," end quote. So where are those findings? Seems to me that the Forest Service has simply blown off the borough and has their fingers crossed that your body will just forget about it. Please let me remind you that as a result of the malfeasance, recovery of nearly $4 million in the form of stewardship and restoration jobs are at stake here. The Assembly's failure to act in less than a substantive manner will be taken as just another case of kicking the can down the road. I believe this is a cover-up of monumental proportions and of local, regional, and national significance. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Weldy, you wanted to testify?
Good afternoon. Excuse me. I'm here to address you on my thoughts on number B on the communications, the request for a letter of support for low-income housing tax credit for the Swell LLC. And my concern is not Swell LLC themselves. I don't know anything about them, but it's the project that they're addressing. And they're wanting to take the property that's on, that they're purchasing from, that's on Excel Street from 1st to 2nd, across the street from the hospital. And so that property is like in my backyard. And they plan on building a building that will house and have 15 units for apartments. And they're talking some are one bath and some are 2-bath apartments. And the developers are planning to set aside up to 50% of the housing units for tenants that are either homeless or have physically or mental disabilities. And that's kind of where my concern comes. Now, I know that we as citizens can't control who buys property and lives here, lives there, lives somewhere else. But when I think about some of the people that may be there, and I think of another property that's similar to this, half a mile out the road, and some of the problems that go on there, that I kind of wonder, gee, are we going to be looking at that? Something like that, maybe, because of the clientele. Maybe, again, don't know. But it's worrisome. You think about what might be in your backyard, and I know, like I said, we can't pick and choose. But I'm wondering, well, 15 units, they got to have 15 parking spaces, so I hope they have enough room for 15 parking spaces for 15 units. And that's going to be a big building, you know, like in my backyard, like you'd like to have it in your backyard. And I hope they put a security fence around their structure. That would be nice. I'd feel better. Big building. I don't know if it has to be sprinkled or not, but it would be bad if they did. Yeah, and for the mentally disturbed people anyway, right there, my property value is going to go down a little bit, I'm sure. Be a little bit harder to sell a house sometime if I decide to with the new neighborhood. And in the letter that I saw that was addressed to the city manager, they said that they plan to send some residents down from Anchorage. So they must be having a hard time getting enough room for them up there, so they're going to farm some out to Little Norway. 2 blocks from the school, from the grade school, yeah, okay. Anyway, those are my concerns, and they're asking for a letter of support from you. I hope you think about it real hard and understand what my concerns are. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weldy, for your testimony. Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just unclear if you are in support of the Assembly writing a letter, or you would like us not to sign a letter of support.
I don't know your rules on if you have to send letters on all your decisions, but probably not supporting it.
Okay, that's what I was gathering from the conversations, but all right. Anyone else in the audience with views related to items on today's agenda? Mr. Sebastian.
Hi, my name's Joe Sebastian. I'm here representing myself. The other day, Petersburg, I met a young man, a child who was a few months old of his 2nd birthday. As I studied this joyful youngster, it occurred to me that if fates allow, this young fellow, his full lifespan of years, 80 years from now, this child will have his 82nd birthday on the year 2100 or 2100 AD, whichever you prefer. And that's how little children work around here. We're busy with all our concerns today, but there's all their concerns for tomorrow. And we haven't been real good taking care of tomorrow's concerns, it seems. That's why we've kind of like magnified our troubles by 100 in regard to climate change and now this rather sham process of changing the roadless rule. So back to 2019, November 4th, with continuous warning signs of the collapse of the mechanics of the natural world around our ears. At what point do we condescend to recognize and ask and acknowledge that we and our world are in trouble due to man-made CO2 climate change? Governor Dunleavy, Senators Murkowski and Sullivan all promote overturning the roadless rule so that clear-cut logging and round log export to Asia may operate a few years longer. Never mind that we have more man-made clear-cuts and roads in the Tongass National Forest than we know what to do with. We have old pulp mill clear-cuts, in-state forest clear-cuts, and university lands clear-cuts, and mental health land clear-cuts, See Alaska clear-cuts, Klukwan clear-cuts, Una Totem Corp clear-cuts, Gold Belt Corp clear-cuts, Cape Fox clear-cuts, Shiatica clear-cuts, Sean Sheet clear-cuts, and please forgive me if I left anybody out. There's probably a few more that I overlooked or neglected to mention. Is it any wonder that Alaskans overwhelmingly rejected the mindless destruction of what's left of the scraps of the Tongass National Forest that are still intact and working for Alaskans and providing sustainable long-term jobs and recreation and hunting and all the things that go with wild lands that that don't have any no trespassing signs like most of the lands I just mentioned above? To top it all off, the science is as clear as daylight that continued large-scale deforestation is pushing the world toward an even further disaster and catastrophe than we are already in now. Even Pope Francis said deforestation must be seen as a global threat. To overturn the roadless rule at this critical point in time is akin to throwing gas on a burning house. And I know we got a lot of firemen in this town, and I was a volunteer fireman myself for a while, and imagine throwing gas on a fire already. It makes no sense. This is no road to prosperity. It is a sure path to poverty and disaster, and it is time to face up to our responsibilities to our citizens and their families and their children, and for this borough to pass a resolution that chooses a no-action alternative to the draft roadless repeal plan. It is necessary and fitting first step to join our neighbors in Cake and Skagway and others throughout southeast Alaska and stop this madness. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Chelsea, can you hear us all right?
Sure can. Just checking.
Okay, just thought I'd check. All right.
Hi, my name's Joan Keltzer. I'm speaking for myself. I'd like to talk to the roadless issue as well. When I go to the harbor and look out at all the boats, I know that each of those boats represents families. Some reflect intergenerational prosperity. Some reflect the startup hopes of someone young. All tell stories of personal initiative. Collectively, they speak of a region invested and dependent on commercial fisheries and the habitat that supports the fisheries. Roadless areas have and always will be the best habitat for fisheries, hosting the coolest fish streams and sucking up ocean acidifying CO2, plus providing safe anchorages for mariners. More employment is generated by 10 seiners from this town than the entirety of Alcan Forest Products. Clear-cutting and exporting logs to China will never build sustainable communities or support multiple generations of families. It'll damage existing job generators. The big push to repeal roadless has not been a homegrown movement. It's opposed across the board by tourism interests, commercial fishermen, recreationalists, subsistence users, and tribal entities. Public comment overwhelmingly opposed changing the policy. The borough needs to take a stand that reflects the interests of fishing families and those invested in tourism. Nobody here owns a log ship. Very seldom has there been such a strong region-wide consensus. People here think roadless is working well. These days, old-growth rainforests are very rare, and so too are sustainable, healthy fisheries. It's no coincidence that the two go hand in hand. There will never be enough money to fix all the damaged landscapes in the Tongass. We owe it to the next generations to leave the remaining roadless watersheds intact. Please support the no action alternative with a resolution. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else in the audience that would like to testify to items on today's agenda? Please state your name and who you represent. Thank you for coming.
My name is Aaron Hankins. I represent myself. Sorry for being late. Had to get off work. I'd like to address the police sergeant and EMS coordinator position. I would like to voice my support for those positions and request that you guys fill them as budgeted. Public safety is important to the town and should be considered. I can't speak too much to the police sergeant position other than I know last week that we had police officers working as our dispatch to help fill the need, and they're having trouble staffing their own shifts. As far as the EMS position, it's not just a training position, it's also that person oversees the reporting to the state after we do a EMS run. So that's your fact checker, and if should anything go wrong, that's also, that report is going to get used. Should a suit come up or question or anything like that, it's also responsible for how we bill. The finance department takes care of most of that, but I believe a report gets prepared by the coordinator, sent up to the finance office, they collect it. That's how I understand it works. I think that's an important position to fill. You don't want to volunteer doing it, because you want someone to report to and be consistent in how the process gets done. So that's all I have.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to testify? Please come forward, state your name and who you represent.
My name is Lila Trask, and I'm speaking for myself. I didn't really know about the Swell LLC, and that's what I would speak to it. I guess I thought that when a building came up, that neighbors were usually notified. And maybe it's not, whether it's city or when it's the property, but usually you get even if you build a little shed, you get notice. And I'm not speaking for or against. I guess I thought that maybe as neighbors that we would have some, learn about it and learn some of the things about it. And then the other thing is that with a person out of town owning, my concern would be maintenance. Who's in charge of maintaining that building and keeping it looking good? Because it is a tourist area. It's the hospital, it's the schools, and we would like that to stay nice looking. So that's just my concern. I wish we would have known more about it and been able to make sure that it's maintained.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Trask. I think they're just asking for a letter of support for funding from Alaska Housing, I believe, is where we're at right now. So I would imagine if it came to the point where they were going to have any kind of construction, all the neighbors would be notified. No, they wouldn't, Liz?
That area is zoned commercial, and that's an allowable use within that area, so there would be no notification. So it's zoned commercial, multifamily is allowed. They don't need any kind of special permitting. They would have to go through normal procedures like fire marshal review and comply with our code and, get a building permit and comply with all building codes. But as far as the land use itself, it is an allowable use.
Okay, the zoning makes it fit the need or the requirement. All right. Thank you for your concern. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to testify to items on today's agenda?
My name's James Kerr. I'm representing Petersburg Police Department. I would ask you guys to support the fire EMS position and the sergeant position. Sandy and I have submitted everything I believe you guys need to check those positions, make sure that they are feasible. I mean, you guys pay us to do our job to the best of our ability, and these positions are basically us telling you we need this to do our job to the best of our ability. I would also like to thank my dispatchers and police officers. My dispatchers just got done, 2 of them are working, they just got done working 16 and 18-hour days straight, or 16 to 18 days straight, 12-hour days. And the officers have been working 12-hour shifts and then being on call during that night. So if the other officer needs backup, they have to respond out as well. There's a minimum 2-hour call out. So if it takes 15 minutes, they get 2 hours worth of pay. But they're on, so they work a 12-hour shift and they answer their phone the rest of their time. On their days off, we try and give them their days off. Lately, just recently, with being short in dispatch, we had to have some officers working there to answer phones so that we can page out fire and EMS and the police department. So I'm asking for your guys' support on these 2 positions. We need them, and the public needs them. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Chief. Anyone else in the audience today that has... Okay. State your name and who you represent.
My name is Annette Bennett, and I represent myself. I would like to address the Swell LLC letter of support. I think that it's the Borough Assembly's job to support housing in Petersburg for all people, and everyone deserves to have a home. This has been a known issue in Petersburg through all of our assessments that we've done through Petersburg Indian Association's done an assessment. The borough has as well. It's all come up as a need for housing, and this is a way that doesn't cost us anything, so why not support this project? To have 15 additional housing opportunities in Petersburg is huge, so I ask that you support that. I also ask that you support the fire EMS coordinator position and the police position as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I saw another hand. Sandy, did you want to...
Sandy Dixon, Fire EMS Director, and I would just like to concur with what everyone else has said. I'm here to speak on 15E and 15F, the EMS coordinator, firefighter position, and then the police sergeant position. So public safety is should be a priority in the community. Think of it as an insurance policy. We all have, if we have a home, we have homeowner's insurance. If we have a car, we have a car insurance. We hope we never need it, but we have it in case we do need it, and it's to protect us. So think about protecting the community. The fire department has not had an increase in staff since 1985. Our call volume has doubled. This position is more than just responding to calls. It is a training coordinator position, but there's day-to-day activity that we do, whether there's a call or not a call. They would also assist with the fire program. Oftentimes the volunteers show up to respond to a call and there's no engineer. This person would be trained to be an engineer as well. We're staffed. I work Sunday through Wednesday currently. Ryan works Wednesday through Saturday, so there's only 1 paid staff on 6 out of the 7 days a week. And then we fill in for each other opposite. Since 1985, that position, the EMS coordinator position, kind of turned into a department head position as well. That happened in 2008. or when I took over, in 2008. I believe it was in 2005 when it became an actual position. So it went from a 40-hour EMS coordinator position to additional duties as the emergency manager / department head for the borough. And since then, there's been lots of duties assigned to that. So it's grown more than just one position. So the volunteers are paying the price for that in the sense of, I can't do it all. So they are not getting as good a training as they should be. I'm also going on calls when the volunteers can't go, and if you've seen nationwide, there's a shortage in volunteers. If you look at our roster, we do have a lot of names on the roster, but that does not mean that people are available to respond to calls. So we already put a big burden on our volunteers who have jobs and families. Some have 2 jobs and lives. So I would ask that you support that position. Again, we haven't had an increase since 1985. All other departments in the borough have increased as the need has arisen. And is there ever a good time to ask for help? We're asking. Unfortunately, it was the year that the governor decided to slash the budget. So please give that consideration. As far as the police sergeant position goes, they're running low as well. They do have a lot of officers, but they're giving 24-hour coverage. So filling that position will help reduce overtime. So please give that consideration. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else in the audience that has an issue they'd like to testify to that's on today's agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the next item on the agenda, and that's persons to be heard on items unrelated to today's agenda. You step forward and state your name, who you represent.
My name is John Haverlick. I'm representing at the first part of this, the Public Safety Committee. I've been running that for the last couple of years. And people have come to me with concerns. The first one is the truck that's it needs assembly blessing to have any of these remedied. There's a truck on Singley Alley and Nordic that hasn't been moved in 4 months, and if you're taking a left out of South Harbor there and you're in a regular sized car, it's hard to see. So it's causing a hazard. Levy and Heidi brought this to me, and they often drive through there. Also, another safety concern is right over here on Hagen and Nordic, especially in the summer when buses and trucks are parked there. Brian Lynch asked that if you could extend the no parking area another 15 feet, you would, if you take a left turn, your vision would be much better. And once the PP&L building was redone, it really has increased the safety there for the other turns. So if you consider that, just increasing that yellow line about another 15 feet. And the other concern that was brought to the committee was the whole over storm sewer leaving Wells Fargo parking lot, between Wells Fargo and the parking lot. If you take a right toward the harbor, a good chance, especially in the winter when there's snow and you don't see it, you can bury your front right tire of your car in there. If something could be done about that, it'd be really helpful. The other thing is we voted and had unanimous support for the EMS, EMT, and police officer position. The committee fully supports that. And I had a couple ideas. This isn't the committee, these are mine, ways of paying for that. Because we know Dunleavy, if you listen to Jonathan Christ-Tompkins today, he's going to cut the budget further again to communities. And one of the ideas I had for helping pay for these 2 positions, I know they're in the budget, but for the future budget, was raising the seniors sales tax card from $100 to $500. And I talked with 6 people that are single household seniors, and they said they spend at least $500 a year in sales taxes, and this would at least help us compensate and pay for these 2 positions. The other thing is putting a 25-cent tax on plastic bags. I was in Anchorage this past weekend, and they've done away with plastic bags totally and just go with paper bags, and the merchants do charge for those. So I think those 2 ways would really help fund. And on the senior thing, and I am one, and have been for a few months or a couple of years or something, but
if you look at the people and age levels, seniors have the highest percentage of paid off mortgages, highest amount in the banks, and we can afford it. The 10% that can't, that are on some sort of assistance, give them a lifetime card. And so they don't have to keep going every year and reapplying for it, and also help with the staffing not having to do that. But the rest of us can afford it, and we should afford it. And it's not fair for, just because you're 65 or more, to not have to pay when the others under 65 have mortgages, have kids, don't have as much money put away, and they're paying for us to get services, especially with this EMT and police position. The seniors are going to need that more than anyone else. So we should be paying our own way. It's only fair, logical, rational, and just because you're 65 doesn't mean you should, get free stuff, especially with the state cutting funding. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else in the audience today with issues that are unrelated to items on today's agenda? Mr. Hofstadter?
Phil Hofstadter, representing Petersburg Medical Center. Just an announcement, next Tuesday, November 12th at 2 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. at the Petersburg Library, we will host a community cafe. I want to let the community know we will have a representative from AARP, that's the American Association of Retired Persons, Director of Advocacy Ken Highlander, here to host that discussion, and the discussion is on aging and healthcare planning. Would like to see a good representation from the community out there. Our PR staff member, Kelsey Lamb, has been putting these cards, and they'll be around town, and if it's okay, we'll leave a couple of here in the borough as well, if that's all right with you all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your input there. Anyone else in the audience with views related to today's agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on our agenda. And the next item is board, commission, and committee reports. There are none. There's one item on the consent agenda, and that's Keto's Cave Bar and Liquor Store 2020-2021 liquor license renewal application. I'd entertain a motion to approve that request.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Lucci, I believe, and seconded by Member Stanton Gregor. Any discussion? All those call the roll, please, Debbie.
Jeff?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Okay, that brings us to item 11 on the agenda, report of other officers. And we have a report today from Southeast Alaska Power Agency voting member from our community, Bob Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a graphic here I want to show that.
We'll have to remove the screen cover.
As soon as we figure out how to...
There's got to be a higher tech way to do it than this, I would think.
It's actually clear, so.
You're good. Nice reach, Steve.
Oh, I'm sorry, Bob. It'll just roll.
Yeah, and now I'm in the way of the assembly, so I'll just turn it around here.
That's fine.
The expert here. Last week, Robert Larson and I attended a SEPA board meeting with a number of things on the agenda, and Robert's in here, and he can please jump in anytime I'm going off, I'm going astray here. There was one item here that's of particular interest to Petersburg, and that happens to be a submarine cable that comes between the islands. You know, a while back we had an outage. That outage was caused by a relay was tripped, and what happened was there was a fault in one of the submarine cables. And if you would, and it took a long time because those submarine cables were put in 1984. They're about 35 years old. They should last at least 40. Some of them should go to up 70 years. You know, they have down in the Puget Sound area. So the question comes is, what was the problem, where is it, et cetera, et cetera. when we figured out where the problem was, and Debbie, if you would go to, I think it's 4.
Hang on, trying to get there. Let me grab it. So if you move it, come on. There we go, okay. Uh-oh.
Keep going.
You go one more.
There we go. This one you're about?
I'm sorry, that's not what I'm looking for.
Next one, maybe?
Yeah, keep going. This is what you're looking at is a bathymetric map. Yes, here's the one I want.
Okay.
Can you put those curtains so that folks can see?
On the wall next to you, Bob?
I'll get it.
Okay.
What we did is or what the staff did is they found where the problem was. The problem is between is off bank and we're not help me out, Robert, I can't think of the other Warnock's fence. And what we found was is that they shut that off. And I need to point out to the assembly that there's 4 cables. These 3 here. The X's are anomalies we found when they did the testing, but I'll leave that go. What you're seeing here is a bathymetric map of what we've got off the island, minus 50, 100, 100, and so on, 400 feet. And it drops off here to 650 feet and beyond. They did a lot of testing, and what they found out is that the problem occurs approximately 2,000 feet off the island, right there. And they can spot it within about plus or minus 50 feet. For folks, I need to show, I guess, power that comes into Petersburg is what they call 3-phase. And each one of these lines carries 1 phase. And so what happened was, when we had that problem, we had a spare cable. And now that spare cable is in use. And this cable is out. And we cannot, if one of those cables comes out, everything's out of sync, and you cannot, Petersburg will not have power if that one of those other cables goes down. So it's a pretty critical problem that they're working on right now. What's happened is that, as I say, the problem has been identified here. That cable, it's 4 inches in diameter, and it's in each of those cables, there's a number of things. There's 4 or 5 casings, there's a leg casing in it. There's also, if you could think of soaking newspaper in oil and wrapping it, well, there's about an inch of oiled newspaper, I won't call them newspaper, but inside of each of those cables. And below that, then, is all the copper, which transmits the power. And inside of that, there's even on the inside, is an oil-filled line that keeps the temperature down on those cables. And the reason I say that, it's a very specialized type of thing to be able to do something with this cable. It is not, you don't find this around most places. As a matter of fact, right now, the staff can't find somebody if we were to get into this place of one of those cables. That's yet to be determined. So where we're at, we're about 2,000 feet now off the island. We have on reserve about 2,000 feet of cable that was put aside at the time. Except this, when you tie in, we're a little bit farther than that. So then the question is what do you do? Well, where we're at right now is when we know where the problem is, and right here, what it does, this doesn't show, this goes around a, kind of like, I'll call it a cliff, kind of like a cliff, and when you look at it, it's almost straight up. So the question is, was it rubbing here, or what happened? We don't know yet because we can't see it down there. That's 400 feet down, or 300 plus feet down, and you can't obviously dive to that point. So what the thinking is right now, also, the thinking is that cable here was laid beside those cables, but something happened that moved that cable. What happened, nobody knows yet. So where we've come out with is that the board has put into effect essentially a kind of a system to take a look at this. The staff has now borrowed an ROV vehicle from the University of Alaska, and they're going to going to put it down on this point here to see whether we can define the problem. The other thing we don't know is this cable out here looks like it's buried, and that's a whole different, rather than laying on the surface. But we don't know that for sure, and that's part of what we have to do is we have to test that. And that testing or that look at it should be done either about this week or next week, hopefully. After we get that, we've also hired a what I'll call a well-respected geologist that looks at things underwater. And so we've asked them to take a look at this to see if there has been some kind of subsidence or some change or something's occurred here that has made this move, which obviously would make a difference on what kind of solution you have. The third thing we've done is that right now they're in communications with. There's only about 2 companies in the world that deals with these submarine cables, and they're negotiating now, or trying to negotiate a contract with an individual to be able to make some recommendations on what we need to do. There's been quite a few questions asked, none of which most of us have answers for. The question should we be able, should we actually lay a new cable rather than fill these? The new cables are smaller, and you've got all 3 phases in one cable. Difference. But if you have one go down, then the whole cable goes down, and that's another question. They're thinking right now that the mobilization cost just to do something right here, about $1 million. And we've heard figures, Robert and I have heard figures anywhere from $1 million to $14 million to fix this problem. But we'll take it systematically and see how this goes. But the 2 points I want to leave you with. One is that we've got emphasis on this to get this fixed, and the other communities agree. There's no question. But we just have to do it systematically and look at the data and see where we come up with. And with that, Robert, do you have anything else that I haven't talked about, or do we have?
Maybe just one little thing that highlights the importance of dealing with this. I mean, we do have 3 cables. They're old. They've been in use. But once we looked at this fault, we also looked at the other 3 cables. It turns out that 2 of those 3 cables are suspended in air, or in water. They're suspended 30 feet up in a water column for over 1,000 feet. They were never designed for that. So we need to have this fixed because we don't know what the future is going to bring for those other 3 cables. And if one of those goes down, then we're looking at running diesels for a year. Petersburg pays $100 for a year of diesel power. So anyway, it's a big deal.
It is. Thank you, Robert. And I'd forgotten about that. So where we're at is that most of this data, we'll have a much better picture of it by the December meeting, so we'll be at a point, hopefully, that we can begin to make some decisions. But what we want to do is we want to get this fixed. It's not an easy fix. If we even decide to fix this, we have to comes in on a barge, you have to bring a barge in, you have to pick this whole cable up off the bottom. And then you have to splice it. And the splicing, I saw a video of one that was done down in Puget Sound. It's very, very specialized to be able to do it. It has to be put back exactly the same as what it was before, so it's not an easy fix. So there's a lot of questions out there, but I just want you to be aware of where we're at. And with that, I'll open for any questions you might have that Robert and I might be able to answer.
Were there any questions?
Mr. Mayor, may I?
Yes.
Bob, has the SEPA board addressed the issue of cost in the sense of whatever costs associated with fixing this, are they spread out over all 3 communities, or will just Petersburg have to absorb that cost?
The spread, right now, we're looking at spread over the 3 communities. The question, though, is that you're headed for, I think, Steve, is that there's a couple other crossings, and we don't know as much about those crossings as we do this one. The thing that in the back of, I think, some of the board's members' minds is, should we be doing, if we're going to spend $1 million to bring that in here, should we in fact do something, on one of the, and I don't know the answer to the questions, but to answer your question, yes, it's going to be spread out.
Any other questions of Mr. Lynn? Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So you mentioned that you had 2,000 feet of spare cable. Does that, do all those lines have 2,000 feet on one end? Or is it just 2,000 feet spare somewhere?
You could, there's a couple questions here as I see it. If you were to do something, say for instance, it's suspended, it would probably take 2,000 feet just to drop one of those back on the bottom. Then we wouldn't have to be able to fix this one.
Okay.
The 2,000 feet, you could cut a chunk, you could actually replace this one, but we don't think there's enough, or the staff doesn't think there's enough to go from the point here to this point here to do it. So you would have to splice, make probably 2 splices in there. I'm not sure that answers your question, but that's...
It's helpful. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And so you have 1,000 feet that is suspended above the bottom. So do you have the same concerns about the other lines as you do that one that is already broken?
These,
yes,
that has to be part of the decision we make, if you're going to do something with this one, it's going to cost us, maybe we ought to go with a whole brand new cable and put it down there. And the other question that was asked was, could we put that down and use one of these as a spare? The answer is, it's never been done, and the electrical engineers say they don't think you can do that. So,
Member Norheim, you had a question?
Yeah, I guess. So you had said it would cost $1 million to put the new cable down? No, that just to get started.
$1 million for move-in costs, just to mobilize, to bring the barges we need to come here from either Seattle or they're thinking now they're actually going to have to come from Japan to come here. $1 million move-in. So when if you're going to have those here, you need to make maximum use.
Okay, and then it was $1 to $4 million to replace after that.
Yeah. Then your
Or,
cable,
sorry,
you got the
14.
cost of the cable and everything else on top of that. Everything else to go.
And does SEPA have that kind of money on hand, or?
The answer is no. SEPA does not have that kind of money on hand. If anybody thought we were going to get more rebates, well, we in Petersburg have not planned on it in the past, so there will probably be no more rebates. There will have to be a bond. The SEPA will have to have a bond. We do have some cash in hand, and we do have an insurance policy that was taken out 2 years ago. But it won't even begin to cover the cost of what this might be.
Okay.
Member Stanton Greger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No questions, but definitely look forward to hearing your follow-up report and what you guys find on the line at our next meeting in December. So thank you for your efforts, Bob.
Okay, can we get some
Yes, sir.
lights back in the room? Thank you, Member Lynn and Robert. So we're still on report of other officers, so it's going to be a long meeting, so maybe we can still move forward. PDC report regarding the Borough Manager's goals and objectives for the 2019-2020 budget year, task number 12 and 13. Community and Economic Development Director Cabrera has provided a letter from PDC Board regarding economic development in response to the Borough Manager's goals and objectives for the 2019-2020 budget year. And these are items 12 and 13 assigned by the Assembly. So I believe Member Mucci, you wanted this on the agenda? Or
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bob and I have talked about it. I think we were talking about just getting an update on the goals and objectives that we had for Steve, and I think this PEDC one kind of popped up first, and I was just...
I guess, Liz, could you have any information to give us, other than the letter? I mean, people could just look at the letter unless we want to discuss where we're at. And then later in the meeting, we're going to talk about manager's goals and objectives as well, I believe. Aren't we, right after the manager's report? What were you expecting to hear, Member Mucci?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I had a question regarding this letter. On the fifth paragraph down, it talks about 3 questions, and it sounds like the PEDC wants to sit down with us at a work session and get some direction from us in regards to those at least 3 questions on the 5th paragraph down. And if the PEDC is looking for directions from the Assembly, I don't think we should try and get together with them. Is that what you're hoping to do?
Is that a question of
Yes, it is.
Well, I think the Assembly gave direction to the manager. The manager asked PEDC to put some information together, and it's a little bit out of context because we don't have any context because you didn't really provide any context for what your recommendations, what you intended with these recommendations. And so this is our best effort at answering your question. If you want to provide more information, that would certainly be helpful to us. We're not sure if we're even on the right track with these, I think. And so that's why it was provided to you, sort of this is what you were looking for. So all the information we got is through the manager and through the mayor who sits on the PEDC board, and they weren't really able to articulate what exactly the Assembly was looking for. So I think this is our first shot at it. So if you have more information to provide so we could fine-tune things, that would be helpful. I guess that's where it sits.
So what you need to give us a response is a direction. I mean, what we expect.
Well, I think you gave that direction to the manager, right? Yeah. And then the manager is now giving something back to you that kind of came through us. Do you want to give him more direction that could come back to us, or how you want to proceed is up to you. This is sort of our best guess at responding to your request.
So through the mayor, yes, she nailed it, which is we've done some work on it. Is this what you had in mind, or do you want something different? And that's an Assembly question.
Any other thoughts from the Assembly? Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't mean to be confusing about this, but I have a letter here in front of us directed to the Assembly with asking 3 questions in that 5th paragraph down. And I'm just trying to sort out if the PEDC and the city manager needs answers to those 3 questions. Is that what you're asking for?
Yes, in conjunction with, as the rest of the report, are we on the right track, or am I on the right track? I mean, the questions are important because they relate to how we approached the various tasks that we've outlined. But, even more than 3 questions, if you look at the report, there's a whole bunch of things, we'll do this, we'll do this, we'll do this. Is that what the Assembly wants? I mean, I think one of them set up a transportation committee. There's various things like that in that document. Is this what the Assembly wants to do? So yes, answers to those 3 questions is useful, but even beyond that, answers to are we on the right track? Are these other ideas that we have put forward, are they heading in the direction that the Assembly wants us to go in? Because if not, then we have to go back to the drawing board. Or I have to.
Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So are you looking for us to ask you questions regarding comments under page 10 through 14 of the agenda?
You can. I mean, that's we can do it in that vein. I mean, I think you said, should PEDC get together with the Assembly? That's a great alternative as well. I mean, to go through the document, if any of the Assembly members have questions on those particular 2 items, is this, do you have stuff you'd like us to have us add to or take away, things you don't like what we put in there? And so it's a combination of, I'll go through the status of my report, but it's honestly, on those 2 items, it's like we've given you something, and I'm going to sit back and wait for the Assembly to say, hey, these are good, Steve, we like this direction, let's move on it. Or, no, we don't like that direction, and we'd prefer you to go in a different direction. So, When it comes to economic development, I think I've said we don't have a lot of resources. We don't have a ton of people or money. So we've got to be pretty specific and, laser pointed in a sense, so that we don't waste your time, our time, money. So, yeah, making sure that the Assembly is on board with the direction we're heading and is super critical before we do much more. I mean, Liz, am I...
Can I...
Do you have a comment, Member Tremblay?
I do. I'm not sure how to jump in on the phone like this. Thank you. I would love to have a work session time to go through these. It's making me think of when we did strategic planning with the library, and Brian Professional spent the whole weekend working on it. And obviously that's probably beyond the scope of this, but even just a quick work session to go through and even just figure out what our top 3 things would be, or 3 least important, or where we could get public involved, and I just think that would be a really great thing. So I'm grateful that this came forward, and I'm open to when people think that could work, or if other people aren't interested, maybe just the few of us coming to a PEDC meeting and talking about it. I think it'd be great. I think we already have a lot on the agenda for today, but having a time for getting into this in more depth, I think, would really benefit PEDC and us as well, because I see PEDC is a great tool to utilize, but I agree that having good guidance going forward is essential.
Yeah, and thank you, Chelsea. Were you done with your comment?
I am, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't see this as it's not an action item today, it was just a report, so at a future meeting, we could have another discussion and schedule something. This basically came about from last year's budget cycle when we gave you directions of things to do. Am I interpreting that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So is there any other comments on this?
Sure.
Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I'm not really into kicking this can down the road. I mean, I think what I want, it would be helpful, I think, for the city manager and helpful for PEDC is to get some comments from the Assembly so that we can move forward. I don't know if we want to try and schedule a work session for November or December to kind of sit down with PEDC and go through these 4 or 5 pages of stuff and answer these questions. A lot of the stuff we can answer ahead of time and have this turned into the city clerk or the city manager to kind of collate all of our comments in regards to these blocks, so that when we did sit down at a work session, we could kind of move this thing farther down the road, as opposed to just kind of talking about it at a future meeting where we just don't. I mean, I know we only have so many hours a day to meet, and I think this is an important thing to kind of try and sort out. I mean, just establishing a processors working group to identify ways PEDC and the Borough can support sectors to bring more volume. I mean, I think I'd kind of like to sit down with PEDC and show them our support for what they're doing and answer the questions that, and give them comments to some of the things that they're hitting on so they can make sure that they understand what we want. Would that be helpful?
I think that's what they're asking for from these letters. But this today on the agenda, this was just a report, so we'd have to, I suppose we could pick I don't know if it's even right to pick a date. If there's a motion to schedule, maybe we could do another doodle poll or something, see what Debbie's favorite. But today, I mean, I think we need to get past this on today's agenda because we've got lots of things to discuss. Member Mucci.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Mr. Mayor. I understand that, but I think it's not going to do us any harm to kind of try and throw out a date. We don't have to do it here, but Debbie can ask us a date in the next 2 months that we might be available for a work session either in the evening or afternoon, just to kind of
Yes,
farther on this.
I could certainly do a doodle poll with PEDC and Assembly members. The one for the hospital board work session is almost ready to go out again, so I can get that done.
That'd be great.
Okay, are we good with that as far as this agenda topic? Okay, moving on, that brings us to the mayor's report, November 4th. Mayor's report, Alaska Municipal League Annual Local Government Conference. Mayor Jensen will attend the AML Local Government Conference and the Alaska Conference of Mayors. Assemblymember Tremblay will attend the newly elected officials training and the local government conference. And Manager Giesbeck will also be attending the local government conference. And we will be seeking letters of interest to serve on the library board still. The Assembly is seeking letters of interest from qualified borough residents to serve on the library advisory board until October 2020 municipal election. There is currently one vacant seat. And all the requests or letters of interest can be sent to Debbie Thompson at petersburgak.gov. To qualify to serve, you must be a registered voter and resident of the borough for at least 1 year. And we're also going to be seeking letters of interest to serve as Petersburg's representatives on the Southeast Alaska Power Agency Board of Directors. We had a report from two of our two representatives just a minute ago. This year we will have two through the rotation. So we will have 2 seats on the SEPA board for voting members and 2 alternates. So we will make that choice on December 2nd. So please submit your letters of interest. Same address, D. Thompson at petersburgak.gov, or dropped off by the clerk's office. Next item on the agenda, I put this on here. We have asked for a mold test of the Petro building, and we've got a summary back from the company that did it, Advanced Look. So we're still in the process of waiting for a cost associated with this mold study. There was mold found in the building. I'm just going to hit on a couple of the highlights of this summary that the gentleman wrote, and I would imagine it's available if someone wants to get it in its entirety. So, mold growth taking place near the location sampled. The good news is that the results indicate that all of the molds, there was 3 different types, I found were in fact dormant, so the building is not suffering from a present water damage issue that is producing active mold growth. The surfaces sampled are definitely mold, and they go to list the scientific names of them, and I won't get into that, but there's 3 different types. As for the air quality per spore count, the entire office area is not doing well. Airborne counts are very high, making it a poor environment for some individuals to be in. Given this information we now have, I do not recommend anyone be present unless they are properly prepared for the environment, such as demo crew with PPE, is that personal protection equipment? I didn't see that anywhere spelled out. So for the warehouse, that insulation will have to go. It had mold in it. I've been involved in a couple projects with the exact same scenario and type of product. I am yet to see anyone that has been able to clean it and pass a post-test or not have the molds returned. So that's where we're at there. And since the agenda came out, and recently we got a report that, and I was going to ask Steve to expand on this a little bit, if he will, about the Tier 2 environmental assessment, and Petro is willing to jump on board with the cost of that?
Yes, sir. Quick background, we did what's called a Phase 1 environmental assessment, and that's basically asking questions and doing physical, and visual review of the facility. From that, they came up with 3 areas of concern around an old heating fuel tank, a picture that showed a bunch of 55-gallon drums that were stored at one point. So the question is, what was in them and could it have leaked? And the bigger one, which was in and around the slab on the other side of behind the building, basically. The consultant was here, looked at all this, and is recommending we go to what's called a Phase 2 environmental assessment. Phase 2 is actually where they put monitoring wells in place and do some soil samples on those 3 areas. We approached Petro with that. Petro is willing to pay for almost all of it. It's about a $27,000 cost to do the monitoring. They're going to pay roughly $22,000 of that, and we're going to throw in with some in-kind use of our excavator and an operator so they don't have to bring an excavator in or something, just save a little money. So that's scheduled sometime in the future. It takes about 8 to 10 weeks for that whole process to run its course, and that's once they get here and set up and coordinate with our public works crew. So that has not happened yet. I'm hoping to hear from them this week. They'll come to town, we'll set up test wells, and then they'll monitor it for a while, and then they'll get back to Petro and us with a report, and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions up to this point on the mayor's report?
Did they give you any indication of the length of time that you need to test that in order to have?
He basically kind of that 8-week period. Some of it's going to depend, I think, on what they start to find. They're going to do bore holes. If they immediately start finding stuff, then it's probably a shorter duration. If they don't find anything, but they find, the water table, it may take longer. But he kind of consistently said an 8 to 10 week period of once they have the wells in place.
Okay, and then I've got a little bit left on the mayor's report. Basically, it's just the United States Census 2020. April 1st, 2020 is the United States Census Day. They're asking for people that are interested to participate in the census. It's a fairly good paying job, $28 to $31 an hour. And if you want any more information, contact the Petersburg Indian Association, the Chamber of Commerce, or the Borough Clerk's Office. And let me look, no side notes. And that's it for the mayor's report. Steve?
Yes, sir.
Report, please.
Thank you. Just wanted to congratulate the 11 newly certified emergency trauma technicians. We're looking forward to them being able to respond to calls. And Sandy, I believe, is working on a bridge course to see if any of them are interested in becoming EMTs. Although her availability for training, we're trying to coordinate that so she's not totally burned out. Sandy Ryan and Chief Stolpe participated in an emergency response plan review and functional exercise at Trident Seafoods for an ammonia release. It's basically going through the plan and what if this happened, who would do what. So thank them for all of that. The Learn Not to Burn program, we had volunteers go to the elementary school during Fire Prevention Week to educate kids in grades K through 5 about fire safety and escape plans. We also had several station visits by kindergartners and preschools, and several volunteers made a visit to the Children's Center with a fire engine. If you haven't already thought about it, the time change is always a great time to change batteries in your smoke detectors and CO detectors. Sandy did attend the local emergency planning committee meetings, which is LEPC, and the State Emergency Response Commission meeting in Anchorage. Most of this was paid for by Department of DHS and EM. This is important because this was one of the areas that the governor cut. The LEPC money is gone, so local communities are having to do this themselves. One of the tasks I had Sandy look at was to bring the issue up. What's the minimum level that communities can do and not jeopardize future funding? It's important because now with no money from the state, we don't have the resources to necessarily do everything that they tend to want us to do. So we're going to continue to push on that a little bit so we have a very good idea of what we can and what's the minimum level we can do that still keeps the community safe but provides the right amount of paperwork to the state and the feds. Leak detection and repair continues to be the main goal for the water department staff. With Public Works help, the leak have been located and repaired on 4th Street and on Sandy Beach. We're still investigating up near the fire hall and on 12th Street. We've requested Alaska Rural Water Association to come back to town with their they got a little better equipment than we did to see if we can pinpoint where we have a leak. We know we have one, and it's fairly large. We just can't seem to find it. McMillan and Jacobs on the Blind Slough Hydro Project was recently in Petersburg to gather geotechnical information at the hydro site. The prelim design for the powerhouse improvements will relocate the lower sections of the penstock, and this will involve some new concrete thrust blocks to be installed to stabilize the pipe when it goes into the powerhouse. The geotech work will establish what extent of foundation work will be required up at the powerhouse to make sure the thrust block is set in a way that the pipe doesn't pull away from the building. With AT&T's assistance, Power and Light was able to repair the fiber optic cable that carries our SCADA information from Crystal Lake Dam to the powerhouse. Cable is in poor condition, and we will need to replace it soon. NC Machinery Mechanics recently were in Petersburg to fully clean, inspect, and repair one of the two smaller Caterpillar generators at the power plant. Thanks to them, and they worked close with our staff. Let's see. Thanks for everybody for trick or treat at the manor. Both the buildings had residents handing out candy, and we encouraged people to stop by. We've got some facility closures coming up. Monday, November 11th for Veterans Day. Thursday, November 28th for Thanksgiving. Some offices on Friday, the 29th. And then the gym is closed on Saturday, the 23rd of November for the Basketball All-Stars Tournament. Kendra is working with the Girl Scouts to run a babysitter course specifically for their group. This 12-and-a-half-hour class reviews business basics, leadership styles, decision-making in emergencies and safety, how to discuss matters with parents, and helps them create a babysitter's kit. There's another group in town that wishes for this class to be taught. Please contact Stephanie to schedule. We have most of our supplies that we need to install the cameras at Parks and Rec. Thanks to Devon and everybody that's been involved in this, we expect to fully begin the installation within the next few weeks. We continue to work through some various maintenance issues at Parks and Rec. We've been installing the new pool lift, reviewed the pumps throughout the facility. We will need to start purchasing backup pumps for the facility to have an on-hand backup. We'll plan that out over several years. The hallway office is a project that we are working on, which was an issue that came up. We're turning it out of being a storage area for Viking Swim Club and us as well, and turning it back into an office so that we can put people down there on occasion, keep it a little bit closer to the community gym. And we're waiting for some information from AT&T to talk about our telephone system. It is unfortunately lived its full life and is no longer working like it's supposed to. We have been upgrading lighting to LED, and we've got some tile pretty much throughout the building that have to be replaced, and we're doing that as we have time. Thanks to Rotary and the Sandy Beach Playground Committee, they've been working together to fundraise to replace the Sandy Beach Playground. They have been successful in receiving a grant from PIA to also include information for the history of the park and native culture. If you want to be part of this process, please contact Desi Burrell or Chandra for more information. Desi, fundraised a little over $2,100 for the playgrounds through Rotary this last weekend at Oktoberfest. Huge thank you to the Petersburg residents for helping make this project a reality. It's a very large project. The playground that they're looking at is probably about a $150,000 project. And as you've heard me say before, the borough is not currently budgeted for that. So it looks like this is the group that's going to get behind it and hopefully raise the money to get this done. Finance has been testing the new sales tax software, still very much in the demonstration mode, but Jody and her staff have gone through several things and offered feedback back to the vendor on what works and what does not. They're also working on PCI compliance. This is the requirement on credit card merchants to keep all of your credit card information safe. They're working great studies for electric and sanitation and the upcoming sales tax audits this winter. So finance is also very busy at the moment. We have received the draft 2019 financials minus the school and hospital info. Jody's reviewing and preparing to write the management's report on that, or letter on that, and then we'll have that ready for the assembly. The borough received $749,770 and some change in fish tax funds from the state. Pursuant to the budget, $350,000 will go to the general fund, and $399,770 will be going to the harbor department. It's a big help. This is one of the targets the governor had for a while, and he backed off on. I don't know if that's still going to be a conversation item or not. And you heard Jim talk about dispatching earlier, so I'm not going to go into a lot of it, but we've got some good news. We've basically have a dispatcher who started today that's already pre-qualified. She was a dispatcher up in Dillingham. And we have another person starting in December that's already coming in on her own time and training at various times. So we're getting closer. It's still a bit of a slog to try to get through 24/7 coverage, but Jim and his staff are taking care of it. That's it. I'm done.
Thank you. Any questions of the manager on his report? Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So will you be looking at an adjusted budget for Parks and Rec to include cameras and installation?
That was budgeted for.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, that brings us to a progress update on Borough Manager goals and objective for 2019-2020. And Steve, would you run us through that?
I will do so.
Real quick.
There's a report in your packets. This is a format I put together right after you gave me the goals to use to try to track things. So I'll continue to use it unless you want other information. So first one was report on the pros and cons of privatizing snow removal in the Petersburg Borough. Chris is working on that. One of the things we're using is the PAPKEYS RFP process that we're doing this winter. The Assembly authorized us to spend $10,000 to have private enterprise do PAPKEYS. We wanted to use that kind of as a test to what are the questions that come up, what are the mistakes that we make, what are the questions the vendor asks. So we've done that. I think we're pretty close to awarding that. Chris, am I correct for PAPKEYS?
Yeah, we're getting close.
So we're going to go through a little bit of the winter before we start looking at, what are the pros and cons. We want to see how that works, and then we'll bring that as part of this report. We'll come back to the Assembly and say, here's what worked, here's what didn't, and here's what the future opportunities are. The Assembly can then weigh in. Outline a succession plan for key borough positions. This is mostly done, should be completed and available for the Assembly by December 1st. We had the biggest time was trying to identify, took a little farther than what the Assembly said, which is identifying what training these folks need to bring to meet the succession plan. So that took a little bit of time, and we had to upgrade some job descriptions, but that should be ready by December 1st. Complete staffing plan for the police department that includes coverage, estimated overtime, and any proposed changes in service levels. This was assigned to the chief and Captain Holmgren. This will be completed when Randy gets back from the academy. It's one of the things I tasked him with was, ask his peers and such, what are they experiencing, what are the tools they're using, and bring that back to us. Prepare various options to the Assembly on the operations of the assisted living facility. The Assembly approved bringing a consultant in for that. That is complete. The report has been disseminated to the Assembly. Basically on that one, if the Assembly wants us to proceed on any of those items, let me know, and we'll move through that. There really wasn't much there. The report was basically that we do a really good job. The recommendations that we could look into are fairly dramatic and not something that we can just go off and do. So it would involve quite a bit of conversation with the Assembly. I'm leaving it in the Assembly's hands on this one for the moment, and if you want to talk about it more, we can do that. Prepare a draft report for the Assembly on the current local service contracts with the borough and potential opportunities for the community to do business with the borough. Draft final report on that was sent out to some of the department heads about a month ago. They're finalizing that up, and then that'll be ready for the Assembly to see. Monthly radio show with revolving department heads. We have done that thanks to KFSK. We've gone through half a dozen departments. The most recent was Sandy and EMS on last Thursday. The next one, based on availability, will likely be the harbor, so Glo can talk about dredging and such and harbor stuff. So, but that's going really well. Although no one calls in, so that's a slight reach out to the community. Access Parks and Recreation Organization prepare report for the Assembly. Department is working through a laundry list of issues brought up by the Moms Group and the infrastructure needs that were already identified by the department. Chandra has continued to send reports to me and the Assembly on the progress and various impacts on the facility. The final report will be part of the budget discussion later this year to determine how the Assembly wants to proceed. The Assembly's basically preemptive. You're going to get a report that outlines, here's what the staffing needs, here's what we are now, here's what the staffing, if you want 5 days a week, open 6 days a week, 7 days a week, here's what the costs are and how those are broken down. And we'll go through each of those when we get to that point. Work with EMT and fire department to develop a long-term staffing and equipment plan. This was sent to Sandy and Jim. They did a great job on it. I had some additional questions that I gave back to them, and we're waiting for Jim to come back to town. So that'll be happening here soon, I'm sure, and we'll get through that. Same with number 9 on the list, which is talking about the Scow Bay facilities, some similar issues. They did a great job on their response to me in putting this together. I had some additional questions that their responses made me think about, so they're working on that, and we'll get back together and go through that. Review the borough purchasing policy. This was harder because we have a very involved purchasing ordinance that has to be taken a look at. I've made some recommendations to change that, which will be brought before the Assembly. I've got a couple more comments to get back from some of the department heads to make sure that what I've changed in there would make sense from their perspective, and then we'll bring it to the Assembly in the form of an ordinance to say, is this what you had in mind? Complete a thorough review of all borough service and permit fees and make recommendation to the Assembly. This is kind of ongoing. There's a whole bunch of them, to be honest with you. We've done the ambulance fees, which is complete. We've done several stuff in finance admin. We've got building permit fees to take a look at yet. Water, wastewater, sanitation, and electric, with all their rate studies, are in process. And Parks and Rec is going to be part of that whole budget conversation because it kind of depends on hours of operation and what the Assembly wants to do. You may want to, if you're going to be open 7 days a week, we may have to raise the rates quite a bit. If it's less than that, it changes the dynamics on how much the rates would have to go up or not. And then 12 and 13 are the 2 PEDC, or economic development items. Basically, thanks to Liz for most of this work. I mean, I sat down and wrote a couple of letters that did not do the idea justice. She put together the matrix you saw and then ran it by PEDC, so we each added in and changed things, and she put it in a format that I think is pretty easy to follow. Once the Assembly is okay with that, we'll provide that to the Chamber to see if there's any pieces and parts of that they're willing or able to help us with. But as we talked about, a work session would be a great idea to kind of make sure from the Assembly's perspective we're on the right track. Excuse me. That's it, as fast as I can do that.
Thank you. Thanks for your update, Steve. Is there any questions for the manager on his update?
Yes, sir.
On number 4 about the recommendations about Mountain View Manor.
Yes.
Do you think that if this 15-unit apartment complex gets built up by the hospital, it might take some of the pressure off Mountain View Manor?
Elderly housing is the area that has a waiting list as well, and I would assume that this 15-unit location would take some of the pressure off of elderly housing. That's not where our money's spent, nor where our staffing is spent, really, though. That's assisted living. So would it help us with the waiting list? Yes, I think it would.
Any other questions? Member Lim.
I have 2 questions for you, Steve. Going back to Parks and Rec, will that report also include, I know there's some things up there that need to be, in the longer term, need to be changed, fixed, what have you. Mm-hmm. Will that report include those types of things?
Yeah, we're going to try to hit all the big maintenance stuff. The challenge with Parks and Rec is that it's a building that gets a lot of use, hard use, and it's getting older. And so we're seeing stuff that we think was okay that is suddenly not okay. The pumps are a good example of that. So to the best of our ability, we're trying to go through the heavy infrastructure items that are going to need some attention. I'm not going to promise we'll get them all. That's, we're having Cody go through the facility And as we've had money and time, we've brought a couple of consultants here to town that are experts on like the pumps or the HVAC system, and had them walk us through and give us some life cycle advice. Yeah, you're good for another 10 years. No, you better start planning for this. That's where the pumps came from. They said, you need to start cycling those through, getting one on hand and getting it replaced. So hopefully it'll include as much of the stuff that we can do that'll be potentially be a problem for us in the future.
Just one other question, if I might, back to a question that Jeff asked. On the Mountain View Manor, as I read that report, there are some small things we could do, as I see in that report. I have to go back and look at it again myself because I can't remember all of them. Was your thinking then, is we just let that sit, or are you thinking about bringing some of those back, or what?
One item we are looking at, which is creating a next up higher tier 5, I think, tier 4, thank you very much, Shitty, which is a level of service we currently don't provide. The challenge is it's expensive. I mean, number one, it's expensive for the person living there. Number two, it's really expensive for us on a staffing level. So we're looking to see what that would mean. So that we're doing on our own. But his real big issue that he came up with, and he even admitted, because Sheila kind of cringed, which was to take the bottom floor of elderly housing and turn it into more assisted living facilities, rooms. That increases our staff, assuming we can find staff, and that's one of the departments we have a hard time getting staff for. And so that's a pretty major deal. That one we are not doing much work on, but the tier 4, yes, we're looking at. It's just an issue of one of the things we wanted to do, and we had a quick conversation with the hospital, is what are their plans? And I'm not sure they're fully developed yet, but when it comes to their long-term care, what are they going to be doing? And we don't want to do anything, we don't want to create a tier 4 if that's where the hospital wants to go. And we don't necessarily know the answer to that yet.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? We're going to take a 5-minute break, so we'll reconvene right after 1:40.
That was really good. I know.
Sorry.
Yes, when they had the print and all the, I mean, obviously this was the computer or the silver, but. So she asked about the.
Back to order, please.
And then we said that the Airbnb.
We've still got over half a meeting left, it appears like, so. Are you still with us, Member Chelsea, are you there? Member Trimbley?
I am, thank you all.
Perfect. Hope you got a little break there.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, so that brings us to unfinished business, and that's ordinances for third and final reading. The first ordinance to address is ordinance 2019-09, an ordinance amending chapter 4.28, sales tax of the Borough Code to clarify that sales tax of marijuana and marijuana products to nonprofit organizations and senior citizens are subject to the borough sales tax. I'd entertain a motion to adopt this in its third and final reading. So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Morrow. Any discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Taylor?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yeah.
Bob?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes. Okay, ordinance 2019-09 passes unanimously in its third and final reading. That brings us to the next ordinance on the list today, and that's 2019-10. This is an ordinance providing for Chapter 3.10 of the Municipal Code entitled Public Notice of Meetings, updating current language to reflect borough incorporation. I'd entertain a motion to adopt this in its third and final reading. So moved.
Second.
Motion by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Burrell. Any discussion? Member Stanton-Gregor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just kind of a note for the public listening. The next three ordinances is really just us cleaning up language, as it says, to update current language to reflect borough corporation. It's just language cleanup stuff.
Yep, just some housekeeping. Any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Jay?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yeah.
Mark?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2019-10 passes unanimously. Next ordinance this afternoon is 2019-11 for its third and final reading. An ordinance providing for Chapter 3.70 of the Municipal Code entitled Petersburg School Board, updating current language to reflect borough incorporation. Entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Morrow. All those in favor, or clerk call the roll, I guess.
Brandy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, ordinance 2019-11 passes unanimously in its third and final reading. That brings us to ordinance 2019-12. An ordinance providing for repeal of chapters 3.42 titled Utility Advisory Board and 3.49 titled Parks and Recreation Advisory Board of the Code of the former city of Petersburg, now Service Area 1. I'd entertain a motion to approve this ordinance in its third and final reading.
So moved.
Motion's been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Morrow. Any discussion on 2019-12? Seeing none, clerk call the roll.
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2019-12 passes unanimously as well, which brings us to ordinances for second reading. And today there's only one, and it's ordinance 2019-13. This is an ordinance adjusting the fiscal year 2020 budget for known changes. I'd entertain a motion to approve this ordinance in its second reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Morrow. Just for the listening public, this is to do a supplemental, basically, or change the budget to allow for construction of the Scow Bay 1 pump station. And we're going to ask for a loan. It's got to repay it, but it's going to come from the department's reserves initially. So, any other discussion? Clerk call the roll.
Mark?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the next item on the agenda today, and that's item 15, new business. And first item under new business is an ordinance 2019-14. This is an ordinance to provide for determining the full and true value of a property that qualifies for low-income housing tax credits under 26 U.S.C. 42. Entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its first reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Stanton Gregor, seconded by Member Mucci. Member Stanton Gregor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was wondering if Finance Director Tao, I know you and I had spoken about something about this in your office, but if you could speak a little bit to this for folks listening at home, what this means, et cetera.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'll do my best, and Liz can chime in if I'm missing anything. Basically, our ordinance does not have anything in it about low-income housing tax credits and private entities taking advantage of that. We were asked by well, maybe I should back up. So anyway, this is a state statute that would put it in our code. Many municipalities have it in Alaska, and it basically helps companies that want to come in and build long-term or low-income housing in Petersburg or in other towns be able to afford to do so. So basically what this would do, instead of it being assessed at true and full value, it would be based on their actual net income, and which we obviously don't know right now, so I couldn't tell you the difference between the two, but what we're currently making on those 3 properties is less than $3,000 a year.
Did you say less than $3,000 a year currently?
Yes.
Okay.
In case you were wondering. Do you have anything to add? Covered it.
So is there any other
basically,
questions?
This would put it on our books. If you approve this in 3 readings, it would put it on our books. This does not give Swell LLC permission to take advantage of this yet, though. Once you approve this ordinance, that would have it on our books for any parcel that would qualify for this. And then you would have to pass a separate resolution for Swell LLC to actually take advantage of this.
Member Stanton Gregor, follow-up?
Yep, 2 follow-ups here. Just to clarify that, so let's say for the sake of argument this passes in 3 readings, and Swell LLC or anyone else would have to come up and request that on a case-by-case basis in the future.
Correct.
Got it. Okay, my final piece of that is, I'm glad this came up today. I'm definitely going to be voting yes on it. It gives us good latitude and discretion for future low-income stuff in the future. There's a point of note with this. It's not on here, but I will, at the next meeting, be requesting, no, it's down there. I'll talk about it later. I'm good.
Okay. Any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2019-14 passes unanimously in its first reading. And we have this item on the agenda one more time, Southern Southeast Regional Aquaculture Association Board Member Nomination. Is there anyone on the assembly, since we have a full assembly today, this might be the last time we address it, but want this appointment? Sarah? Member Merle? Okay, so is there any objections from other assembly members? Okay.
Thanks, Brandy.
Thanks for putting your name in, and hopefully you get elected and can represent Petersburg. So you will send that to...
Yes, I'll need to talk with Randy a little bit. We have to do a little bio thing, but yes, we'll handle it.
All right, perfect. Thank you. We're past that one. Okay, now that brings us to item C under new business, and it is assembly appointments. And there are a few to make this evening, or this afternoon, I guess. It feels like evening for some reason, but the first one is for vice mayor, and without, let me back up a little bit here. The first 7 of these positions are appointments by the mayor with approval of the assembly. So the following assembly appointments are needed. Vice mayor, and I would, with approval of the assembly, I'd like to appoint J. Stanton Gregor as our vice mayor for this following year.
Could we do this with a motion and stuff? Is that how we do it? I forget.
If there's opposition to the appointment, then I don't think we need to. I don't feel we need to unless the assembly would like to do it differently.
I agree with the mayor. Unless there's opposition, I think we're good.
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you.
The next item is 2, Southeast Conference Representative, and I've been in that position for the last 7 years or so, and I would like to, without any opposition, appoint myself to the Southeast Conference Representative. Is there any opposition? Member Mucci.
Mr. Mayor, I too am interested in that representative spot.
Okay, so we need to vote. All votes are done by voice vote, right? Aren't they?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so all those in favor of Mayor Jensen for the position?
Can we have a discussion on this too?
Sure.
I just had a question.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Clarification.
Yes, a point of clarification. For Clerk Thompson, if you would. This is kind of a broader thing, but does it say that we can only have one Southeast Conference representative, or can we have multiple ones?
We can have multiple. There is nothing that says it has to be only one representative. I think it's just how it's been done.
Roger that. So my follow-up would be, this jumped out at me when we were talking about this and some other appointments. Years ago, the mayor had asked me to go to Wrangell as a part of the control board for marijuana was going to be over in Wrangell, and asked me to go by myself and kind of come back and report. And I wanted nothing to do with it by myself, because I figured it's something this large, you want to have more than one set of eyes, set of ears. And from my perspective, I think it would be worthwhile to have 2 representatives. I don't know what our budget allows for that, but Southeast Conference is a big part of our, of everything we do, and I'd really like to have more than one set of eyes or ears there. I don't know how to go about that, but I wanted to throw that in as part of the discussion, I guess.
Member Lynn?
I agree with Member Gregor that it would be good to have 2 members there and 2 people in attendance, and I would say the same thing for Alaska Municipal League. But so I would propose that, we look at 2 members or 2 people attending.
So, with that being said, we should probably take a poll of the assembly to see if the majority of the assembly agrees with 2 representatives.
I think maybe a motion.
I'll do that. So I move that we elect 2 Southeast Conference representatives from our borough assembly. Does that suffice, Clerk Thompson?
Yes.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Stanton Gregor, seconded by Member Lynn to appoint from the assembly 2 representatives to Southeast Conference. Any discussion on that? Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I suppose Debbie would tell us what she gets a hold of the Southeast Conference, if that's doable, or then we can bring it back for discussion.
See, this is actually just a representative that the assembly decided we would have. I don't believe it has anything to do with our membership to Southeast Conference. We have that no matter what. But I think the assembly decided that they wanted to have someone from the assembly attend the Southeast Conference meetings, attend the Alaska Municipal League meetings on behalf of the assembly.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So then, since we're still in the discussion part of this, if we vote to have 2 representatives at these functions, there's times when you vote for board members, or you vote for other issues, whether you support the position statements. So are we going to have to go and vote? Because I believe you only get 1 voting member. So would we have to expand this a little bit?
Maybe you guys would need to decide who you're going to vote for before you get to go, so that you know what the body wants. I'm not sure exactly.
Right. Okay, so maybe that was I just wanted to throw that out there while we're in discussion. Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, speaking of position statements, I think that's why it's important that if we are asked to give a position, either at Southeast Conference or Alaska Municipal League, that it is brought before the board so that the board has a chance to weigh in on it, and it's not just one individual who might be speaking for the entire assembly, but at least it should be brought to the assembly before it is voted on. And I don't think that would be a big issue with both of those conferences, because usually their position statements are published ahead of time, so a person would know what was being voted on.
That part of it makes total sense. It's when you're at these functions and you have put your name in if you want to be on the board of directors or on the conference of mayors or something that basically takes place at the function.
Right.
So, and there's, you get a little sheet, every community gets one little sheet to hold up to vote. So I just think we need to make sure we don't have any confusion in that respect. So anyway, back to whether or not we're going to have 2 representatives to Southeast Conference. Is that discussion over? Everybody remember?
I guess my question would be is if we can only have 1 voting member present, are we going to be paying for this other person's travel, or is this whole thing paid out of pocket by you guys?
That is what we're voting for, I believe, at this point, is to have 2 representatives from Petersburg to Southeast Conference. Yes. Correct? Is that the way the motion was made? Maker of the motion?
Correct.
Okay. So without any...
Very quick clarifier, though. It isn't about, just to clarify with Member Norham, isn't there only 1 voting member there, but they can both be present, doesn't say one can't be there. We only have 1 voting member taking marching orders from the assembly.
Right.
I heard you right.
I'm just saying, if we're sending 2 people, we're now paying for 2 people instead of 1.
Correct.
Right.
Got it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
What was your last comment, Member Norheim, that if we send 2 people, we won't be paying for?
No, that we will be paying for 2 people.
That we will, okay. Better turn my hearing needs up. So, okay, we're going to vote on the amendment to have 2 representatives to Southeast Conference. Clerk, call a roll.
Bob?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
No.
Jay?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yeah.
Brandy?
No.
Taylor?
No.
Okay, what's the count?
Passes 4-3.
4-3. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, so we're back to representative for Southeast Conference. All those interested in being representative of Southeast Conference, just say so. And I believe so far currently it's Member Mucci and myself. Is that where we're at?
Yes.
Okay. No, is there any discussion on that? Seeing none, clerk, call the roll.
Bob?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to appointment 3, Alaska Municipal League representative. And if there is no objection, I'd like to appoint myself to be the representative to Alaska Municipal League. Member Mucci.
Mr. Mayor, with the same argument of the Southeast Conference representative, I would like to have 2 people represent the city of Petersburg at the Alaska Municipal League.
Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Motion been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Stanton Gregor to have 2 representatives for Alaska Municipal League. So we're amending to have, I guess it doesn't need to say how many, but we're voting now to have 2 representatives to Alaska Municipal League from Petersburg Borough. Member Morrell?
As much as I like the idea of having 2 people there, I just don't really feel with all the budgetary restrictions that we should be sending more than 1. That's where I'm at.
Any other discussion, Member Norheim?
Basically, on the same line, I thought we were trying to reduce our budget, and here we are increasing it. So, yeah, it's a good idea to have more people there to all these various functions, but now we're increasing it again. Come on.
Okay, thanks for your comment. Member Lynn?
I just have to ask a question here. Right now, I'm on the one of the committees for AML. So if we go with 1 and the mayor is the person, so that means that obviously then I would need to resign my position because there'd be no more attendance at it.
I don't view that this way. I view this as being probably the voting member representative from the community like it's always been. So we're adding another layer. And like I mentioned when we were talking about the representative of the Southeast Conference, at some point we're going to have to decide who's going to be the voting member representing this borough in a voting capacity. So, but as far as you not being on a policy committee anymore, I don't see it that way. I mean, for this trip coming up in November, the manager's going, I'm going. Right. Assembly member Tremblay is going for different various reasons.
Yeah, I understand that. But I just want to make sure that if we make, and I don't have any problem with making the mayor, the voting person, but does that mean that nobody else attends? Does that mean that you don't want anybody, the assembly doesn't want anybody else on the committees or participate? That's a question I got here.
Member Stanton. Yeah, thank you. Just holler at me and I'll recognize you. You've got the floor, Member Tremblay.
Okay, thank you. I think I share those concerns, and I understand the concerns of Assemblymember Norheim about the overall cost, but overall they're actually rather nominal compared to what I think are the benefits of having multiple people representing our community. You and I are both heading, Mr. Mayor, to the same conference, and we're probably going to be meeting with different people and having different conversations, and I think that can only be a good thing, and we need to be collaborating with other communities around the state and figuring out what the future lies ahead. So I think having 2 people does make sense, and I think finding compromise when it comes to the voting to represent the community overall makes sense. So as far as I'm concerned, it just seems logical.
Okay, thank you. Member Stanton Gregor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I echo comments by both Member Lynn. I think it makes sense for you to be a voting member there. But I like that Member Tremblay touched on there's a lot of different things going on out there and a lot of different meetings, a lot of different people, and I agree that it's a nominal investment in the sense that it gives us a chance to further Petersburg interests in the state, to make new connections and find different ways to diversify our economy, form different relationships. I think it's a really good investment to have. We could have more people there, I'd be willing to pay for it, but I think 2 is a fair compromise on that. So I'll be voting yes.
Any other discussion? Member Mucci?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I guess we're chatting about whether or not we're going to have 2 representatives to Alaska Municipal League. I mean, we already have one, Bob's kind of representing us, Member Lynn is representing us on the policy committee, and the mayor is on the conference of mayors. So we more or less already have 2 representatives on the ML, I'm thinking. So I'd like to amend that motion that our 2 representatives to AML are Councilmember Lynn and Mayor Jensen.
That work for you, Clerk Thompson?
That works for me.
Second. Sorry, let me clarify.
Okay, so we're voting still for 2 representatives to be able to go. And that Member Tremblay and Member Stanton Gregor, and I think we all feel the same way. And anybody that's been to these, there's, 3, 4, 5 different topics being discussed at the same time that are of interest to us, like, a various number of things, school funding and PERS, and you can only be at one at a time. So if we can afford it, it's nice to have more than one person go to get in on the information, get in on the conversation, and to bring back the information. Clerk Thompson, you have a comment?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say really the only difference here, when I do the assembly budget, travel budget every year, instead of what I normally do at this point, I budget for the one AML representative, and then I budget for however many new assembly members we may have so they can go to NEO, the newly elected official training. So the difference would be now I will budget for 2 AML representatives and whoever is new on the assembly. That's really it.
Pretty much, yeah. So, and then if other assembly members have the desire to attend, then they have to get permission to put it in the budget.
Correct.
That's the way I would see it. So we're voting on 2 representatives to Alaska Municipal League?
Correct. Ready?
Clerk, call the roll.
Okay.
Mr. Pointer, just a question. So the 2 members then have been identified as Member Lynn and Mayor Jensen?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Brandy?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yeah.
Mark?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the 4th appointment this afternoon, and that is the liaison to the Harbor and Ports Advisory Board. And since we had Member Walhuter retire this election, is there anybody interested in this position? Member Ricci?
Mr. Mayor, I'm interested in serving on that as a liaison.
Okay, is there any objections? Seeing none, Member Mucci has the spot.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question.
Member Mucci.
Yeah, on the AML representative, was that an amendment to the main motion, or was that the main motion as amended?
Well, I kind of felt we could have voted again, but we would have been voting for the same thing. Would you like to?
Exactly.
I just wanted to have some clarification.
I thought it was clean enough. It was decided in discussion that I thought the one vote was okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I thought that too, Member Mucci, but yeah, thank you. Okay, so Member Mucci is the liaison to the Harbors and Ports Advisory Board. That brings us to the 5th appointment, liaison to the Hospital Board. We have Member Lynn in that capacity now, and I would like to reappoint Member Lynn to that position without objection from the Assembly.
Yeah.
I don't see any hands coming up, Member Lynn, so are you willing to serve?
I'll serve until, I've asked that that be put on the work agenda when we meet with the hospital board. And so I've asked that, I still believe strongly that it's really no longer needed, but I'll wait till we get done with that. So let's continue it as is.
All right, we'll continue holding that position as a borough representative until we change our direction on that. So then the 6th appointment is liaison to the Public Safety Advisory Board, and I believe Member Mucci, were you currently there, or was Member Morrell?
Not me, Mr. Mayor.
Are you still interested in doing that, Member Morrell?
Honestly, I didn't attend. I only attended once, so if someone else is more interested,
okay, I'm just trying
I think that would be better for everybody.
Thanks for being honest about that. Is there any Assembly members interested? Member Norheim, you have your hand up.
I could probably do it.
Okay, I'd like to, without objection from the Assembly, appoint Member Norheim to the liaison of the Public Safety Advisory Board. Any objections?
Thanks, Taylor.
Seeing none, thank you, Member Norheim, for putting your name in. And elected official to the Local Emergency Planning Committee. I believe that's the one Member Mucci was part of. Would you like to keep that position, Member?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I would be if it's necessary, and I'm just asking Sandy if it is necessary.
Sorry, I was writing a note.
Well, I guess we could appoint, and if it's not necessary, you just don't go.
I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Any objections? Okay, thank you, Member Mucci, for willing to be in that capacity again. So do we have, well, there's one more, isn't there? Okay, that's 8, mayor's seat on the PEDC board. PEDC bylaws state that the seat is for the mayor or the mayor's designee from the assembly, and this appointment does not need assembly approval by the bylaws of the PEDC board, and I would like to continue in that capacity. It's, I haven't been there that long, but it's a lot of interesting information that we're discussing. So with that being done, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. And appointments to the Planning Commission. We have 2 letters of interest. The letters of interest are from Nancy Strand, former Assembly member, and Heather O'Neill. And without objection from the Assembly, I'd like to appoint Nancy Strand and Heather O'Neill to the Planning Commission. So, any objections? Seeing none, thank you, Nancy. If you're in the audience, and if you're listening, Heather, thank you, and I'm sure the clerk will make it official, whatever you need to do that. Okay, that brings us to item E, and it's coordinator, fire EMS Director Dixon, request authorization to advertise and fill the EMS coordinator / firefighter position, which is currently funded in the fiscal year 2020 fire department budget. I'd entertain a motion to authorize this request.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Norheim. Discussion. Member Stanton Greger?
Yeah, I'll go first. Why not? First out of the gates, I'll be voting for this. I've spoken about it many times. Director Dixon has talked about the increase in E911 calls this year. EMS is something, as Director Dixon talked about, is like insurance. You really don't want to use it, but when you need it, you're so glad you have it. Something that's been budgeted for, and we've had multiple people turn out today to talk about the importance of it in the community, including department heads who know their department better than others. I know an argument has been made that with state budget reductions, we should be very leery of how we spend our cash, and I do not disagree with that at all. Fiscal responsibility is critical. That said, I don't want us to be constantly living in fear, especially in regard to public safety in terms of the governor's budget. So I will be voting yes today.
Any other discussion on this authorization request? Member Norheim?
Basically that I think we should be supporting this. I have a hierarchy of things that should be paid for first and foremost, and I think public safety is, well, I know it's up there at the top of priorities, and with the increased call volumes and stress and all that stuff, it has to be paid for. I mean, I feel like it'd be incredibly irresponsible at this point to not do it, and maybe there's a different solution to this, but that's later on down the road, and I just think it's been kicked off for too long to just keep ignoring it as irresponsible.
Member Morrell.
I agree that there needs to be help up there. I don't know if I'm for a full-time position with benefits. I think that maybe a part-time position I'd be more for, so I'm a little hesitant on which way I'm going to go here. But I do think that Sandy needs help, or at least her workload reduced. But like I said, I think there might be alternative ways to find that. Like I said, maybe a part-time or seasonal position or something where she can have some help, but it's not going to cost us quite as much.
Any other comments? Member Bucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'll be voting for this. I'm lucky enough to get the EMT roster on a monthly basis about who's on call, or not as much who's on call, but there's 3 dates in November that if you're going to get injured or hurt, they're November 8th, November 18th, and the 23rd, where they are full in the morning and in the evening shift. And all the rest of them are kind of very, very skinny. There's 3 nights that no one has signed up for. There's 8 nights with 1 person has signed up. There's 12 nights with 2 people. And then there's 6 nights with a full crew. And so, what that means is if we only show up with 1 person up at the fire hall to drive the ambulance, then that person has to wait for somebody else to show up to at least respond to the scene. Like Member Stanton Gregor said, if you need the fire, EMS, or the police to show up at your house, you're not too concerned about if they didn't have enough people scheduled or people didn't volunteer to schedule. You want to know why they weren't there in a hurry. And we have a couple of issues up both at the fire hall or EMS and the police department that we need to sort out. I know we have issues up at Parks and Rec about understaffing, but I'm not in support of funding Parks and Rec with more employees. I'm more concerned about taking care of the health and safety of the community, and I think these 2 positions, at least this one for now, what we're talking about, needs to get filled. If members of the Assembly have alternatives about what they'd like to see, I'd like to see them bring those ideas forward, but right now, this is the option that's in front of us, and I'll be voting in favor of this.
Any other discussion?
Basically, just to add to that last comment about the other options, I still haven't seen another option presented. So, and we've had a year to figure this out. If you have another option that's ready to go right now, let's hear it.
Well, it's not part of this vote at this current time. We're just to vote whether we're going to fill this position or not. But I have a comment too if there's no other Assembly members that still wish to comment. Member Lynn?
Go ahead.
No. Like I stated last year when we were discussing this, I'm still very concerned about the state's budget. I'm also very concerned about having proper protection from the EMS and to fill the sergeant's position as it appears like they're needed. I'm kind of on the fence on how to vote on this. I probably will not support this because I don't know if this is going to be something we're going to be able to fund in perpetuity. And unless we decide to cut somewhere else from our budget, I'm just worried that at some point we're going to come out, we're going to be out of money. We're not going to have the money to fund this. And as far as level of importance, I think public safety is important. I guess on one hand you could vote for it and hope we get the funding. On the other hand, if you vote for it and we don't get the funding from the state this coming fiscal year, like has been insinuated by our representative and our senator, then we're going to have to revisit this at our budget time. So that's my input on this. Is there any other comments or discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
No.
Bob?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes. Okay, we have a direction to authorize Director Dixon to advertise for a new EMS position with a 6-1 vote with the mayor in opposition. That brings us to the next item on the agenda, F, Police Sergeant position. Chief Kerr requests authorization to advertise and fill the vacant Police Sergeant position, which is currently funded in the fiscal year 2020 Police Department budget. I'd entertain a motion to authorize this advertisement.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Stanton Gregor. Discussion.
Yeah, I have something.
Okay. Member Tripp.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be looking forward to voting to approve this, just as I did the previous position. And just a short story, I am south right now, and someone else who was on my plane south out of Juneau this last week was Donna Arden, the former budget director for the Dunleavy administration. And my Juneau contacts say that was her leaving the state officially. And I like to think of it as the beginning of a new era where maybe at the state level they can think less about the false sense of financial bankruptcy and really come to terms with the actual moral bankruptcy of asking communities like ours to make these kinds of tough decisions. So these are budgeted positions that I'm excited to support, and I'm thankful that we're coming to this discussion again.
Okay, thank you for your input. And any other discussion by Assembly members? Member Stan Gregor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It'll be a bit of a broken record. My feedback on this is very similar to that on the EMS position. Phil Hofstadter from the hospital was here a while back talking about the importance of 24/7 coverage. The hospital is a very vulnerable piece of infrastructure in the evening, and they like knowing they're supported. Very similarly to EMS, you don't need the police coverage until you do, and when you do, you really want it quickly. And we've been very lucky here in Petersburg to have very prompt professional police coverage, and on a non-public safety aspect, this is going to definitely cut into the amount of overtime paid and will help the budget as well. So I think it helps both public safety and the fiscal situation. I'll definitely be voting yes.
Any other discussion? Member Morrell?
I have just a couple questions for Officer Kerr, or Chief Kerr. You had once told me that 8 was your key number, right? And I was just curious where you were at for staff right now and for dispatchers. Just
right now we have 3 dispatchers. We just hired 2 more, the one from Dillingham, which hopefully we can make that training done in a month. We just hired another one, that's Sheena Canton, which starts in December. And so that's going to take a while to get dispatch up to full staffing. I'm hoping just after the first year we can have that all done. And then the officers, we're currently at 7 plus the CCAD grant. So that will bring us, if this position goes through, it'll bring us up to the magic number of 8 plus the CCAD grant as well.
okay. And one more question, if that's okay.
Member Morrell?
And then, so the CCAD grant, that officer I know that he can't patrol. Can he respond?
He's technically by the grant, if you go by the letter of the grant, he's for CCAD, the drug enforcement stuff only.
Okay.
Does he respond to help us out when stuff is bad? You can guarantee that.
Okay.
So.
Okay, thank you for that question and the answers. Member Mucci?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm going to be supporting this. I'm really looking forward to getting rid of most of the $150,000 in overtime that we've been paying to the police department over the last several years. If we're paying that much money for overtime, then we can pay a little less for sergeant. I know there's going to be continued overtime in certain spots, but I want to see this position filled. Well, we also had a report from Senator Murkowski about payment in lieu of taxes, about how some of those funds could go towards possibly offsetting cost of fire, EMS, and police positions around the state. So I would hope that we would be looking at those funds to kind of help us out if it looks like we could be getting tight on funds. I mean, I would imagine that when these interviews are going on for both the police sergeant and the EMS person, that part of that discussion would be, who knows how much money we're going to have from year to year, and funding could be tenuous. And but I think these are 2 of my priorities for this year. I think they, like I said before, I know there's issues up at Parks and Rec, but they don't rise to the level of importance as the fire and EMS and the police department. So I'll be voting in favor of this.
Any other discussion? Member Lynn?
Yeah, I was looking at the projecting the budget for next year, and it looks to me if we lose, we have to pay the school bond debt. I'm not in favor of raising taxes in Service Area 1 at all. And that's a 5% hit. So if we approve this, I'll be very interested to see how much, what we're willing to cut in order to make things balance here if we approve this.
Yeah, I think the discussions are going to get harder instead of easier for budget. But maybe, hopefully I'm wrong. So is there any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Randy?
Yes.
Mark?
No.
Chelsea?
Yeah.
Bob?
No.
Jay?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Okay, at the sergeant's position, the authorization to advertise for that passes with a 5-2 vote with Member Lynn and Mayor Jensen opposed. That brings us to the proposed budget calendar, and this is a budget calendar put before us by Finance Director Tao. And one question, Jody, I guess I talked to you earlier today, and it sounds like it's pretty much the same schedule with potential for some meetings if we so desire?
It is. I changed the dates. I added, there's any time during the year we can have work sessions to talk about these things. Anytime to talk about the budget. And we might want to change some of these dates when they get closer and find out we might not have a quorum or whatnot. But it's just a loose schedule to keep us going forward with the budget process.
Okay, is there any discussion? Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, my concern was to kind of hopefully move this up by a month if possible. The budget requests of department heads and community organization in March 16th. I mean, we get into the same kind of calendar issues that we got into this year with having meetings on the 4th of July to raise the property tax. And I don't expect, I expect the same message to come out of Juneau next year as came out of this year. And I was kind of hoping that we could sit down in November or December and just talk about what the Assembly's budget direction is going to be, or just maybe give Steve some indication of what we're thinking. Again, whether we're going to ask him to prepare a balanced budget, which means things remain the same, or if we're going to have him do a reduced budget. Everybody talks about, they want to reduce the budget, but we never get a chance to actually see what that reduced budget looks like. And I'm kind of hoping that we could have that discussion in November, December, or January, just to kind of let the city manager know, as well as department heads know, kind of what our thoughts are. That's kind of where I was headed with that.
Okay, Member Norheim?
So I guess my question would be, I hear that maybe we'll lose the fish tax, so are we asking them to prepare a budget that's going to be short $800,000? And then just maybe voting on that one instead of the one that isn't short $800,000? Because that's a lot of money to just have two separate budgets. I think that's why we have it so far down, is because we need to know the money that's coming out of Juneau to prepare a budget that shorts that significant amount of money beforehand, and then rolling with that instead?
Member Lynn and then...
Yeah, I've got a couple questions in my own mind about whether it's earlier or not. From the perspective of Director Tao and the manager, I think it'd be good if they knew kind of the general feeling of where we're at up front. For instance, my comment earlier is that I'm not willing, if you're going to ask me to vote, I'm not willing to increase taxes in Service Area 1 if that school bond debt's passed, or if they do away with some of the other payments. I'm not willing to pass that on to the taxpayers. That means we have to reduce, or would pass that on. And those are the kind of questions that I think would be helpful from my standpoint that we could pass on. And maybe the question is, going back to your point, is what is the effect if you have a 5% reduction in budget? Without putting, hundreds of hours into this, because there's a lot of work goes into putting this budget together.
Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, no, I agree. But I think, the discussion needs to start earlier than later. I guess, to the city manager, would it be a big issue if we decide to have you prepare some preliminary numbers on a budget that has a 5% 5% decrease across the board in all departments?
Manager Giesbert?
Yeah. Okay, so Jody, correct my math. 5% off the general fund would be about $450,000, give or take. So, you know, so what specifically does the Assembly want to cut that's valued at $450,000? That would be, for example, shutting the library down. I mean, I'm not trying to be sarcastic. I'm just making a point. The kind of things that are important for us to know is how to tell the department, for me and Jody, to tell the department heads, don't send us a budget that is bigger, the same, or less. What is it that the Assembly wants to do? And that is super valuable to not waste everyone's time. Sorry.
Member Morrell?
Can we, maybe, I don't know, maybe, can we get together maybe and just decide, just so that everybody has a direction of what the majority of us are thinking, as in, are we willing to put taxes on the taxpayers, just simple bullet points so that they can get, then there's just a general broad direction given to, as opposed to having you construct a complete budget and then, because that seems a little tedious.
That would be very valuable.
Okay.
And so I was hoping we could do something like that when we discuss the budget policies that are going to go out in December or November to you, and then we'll maybe could meet about them in December. I mean, it's a lot of work for department heads to put together the budgets, and no one wants what happened this last year to happen again. I mean, it was terrible. And obviously, this June, our last on the schedule, if you're looking at the calendar, the third reading of the budget ordinance is on June 1st. Well, June 15th is actually, would be our second meeting, and the budget needs to be approved by then, so that gives us a little bit more leeway to, if we need to change some things around. But I think I have some ideas of things that we could do, and I think maybe other department heads do too, and the Assembly does too, and we can just talk about it and figure out, you know, a game plan to go into this budget year.
Any other comments? So we could, you know, approve this calendar as presented, and we could always, well, last year we had to do the special vote on the 4th of July, so I mean, I've got a sneaking hunch we're going to have the same situation this year unless there's an effective recall, and I don't know that that's going to happen. I guess we're going to know if that can even move forward today, but I think the more information we have on the income we're going to get, we can make a better decision on how we can, you know, draft up a budget. It's like balancing a checkbook without knowing what your income is, kind of. But as far as getting together and talking about expectations, I don't see anything wrong with that plan. Member Bucci?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just so I understand that we're looking at possibly having a work session sometime in December to discuss our budget direction. But, you know, the other part of this conversation is we are not going to know what we're getting from the state to put in our checkbook until June or July. I've said it before, you know, I think it's really important for us to get our priorities squared away and a budget put together based on our priorities, whether or not it's to reduce services and hours at certain facilities, as you know, the hard, cold facts that we might not be able to be open as much as we would like to be. But, I mean, I think it's up to us to kind of put our stuff together and not wait for the governor to kind of tell us what he's going to give us so that we can decide how we're going to do it. I think we need to kind of get our house, take care of our own stuff before the governor kind of whacks away at us.
Okay, any other discussion on the budget calendar presented to us by the finance director?
Yeah, just briefly, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I agree with Member Michi. I wish it was earlier. It would have been probably, I don't remember how many years ago now, it was earlier when it was on the Assembly. The school district had talked about liking to have an earlier budget calendar because they write their contracts in March. I get all that and it makes sense. But the reality is, with the uncertainty at the state, we're kind of had either way at this point. It would be, in my opinion, negligent to pass something we thought was prudent, 3 months before we find out what kind of money we have. And as Member Norheim said, suddenly we're $800,000 in the hole. That's us being, we're not doing our jobs well at this point. So I think I would just say to the Assembly, let's go with this, and then we'll have to be adaptive as things play out. There's going to be a lot of moving parts, and we'll have to do our best. That's all.
So any other Assembly members that haven't had input? I guess we all have had input on this. So clerk, call the roll on the presented budget calendar.
Did we have a motion and a second? I don't believe we did.
Okay, well, we had the discussion, let's have a budget, is there a motion to talk about this?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, I'm sorry about the technicality.
That's okay.
Meeting's getting to be a little lengthy, but, so a motion was made by Member Stan Gregor, seconded by Member Borough, I believe, and looks like she's getting ready to leave, like she said she had to at 2:30. So, is everybody okay with taking a vote, or should we have all the discussion again? Okay. Clerk, call the roll.
Jeff?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yeah.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we have set a budget calendar, and it's up for modification as we move forward. Hopefully, we have some inkling what the governor's thinking about doing in December when he comes out with his preliminary budget. Communications, roadless rural communication, we had resident Becky Knight talk earlier, and a few other people about the roadless rural, and Becky Knight has sent some information to the Assembly about different opinions on the Tongass roadless rural exemption. Is there anyone that would like to talk to this communication? Okay, well, that's one communication we had. The next item on communications is a request letter of support for a low-income housing tax credit housing application from Swell LLC. I received this as an email, and I looked at it, and I thought it was something that the Assembly definitely needed to look at and decide if we wanted to send forward. The letter's in the packet, so I would entertain a motion to approve sending this letter of support, because you have to make a motion in the positive. So move. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Member Michi, seconded by Member Stanton Gregor. Discussion. Member Stanton Gregor?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I got the opportunity to speak on the phone. These guys last week, they called me both as a private practitioner here in town and as an assembly person, and it was really good listening to their plan. Short answer is I think it's a really great idea for the community. The idea of, I think it's kind of a false narrative that this company's going to be shipping in lots of people who have no money and won't be contributing to our community. That's kind of the narrative I heard earlier in the visitors' views related to the discussion or to the agenda. This isn't just for people with emotional and physical disabilities. This is also for our working poor. The people who serve us food, people who help us all around town, at the grocery store, hardware store, etc. There's so many people who this would benefit. Different groups have met over the years, and one common theme that comes up for Petersburg is the lack of affordable housing. I am excited this group has taken it upon themselves to have the forethought to purchase these lots and have a vision for bringing affordable housing to some of our working poor here in Petersburg. I'm most certainly in favor of a letter of support to Swell LLC.
Any other comments? Member Lynn, did you want to?
Just a question. I need to ask Liz, again, from a couple comments that we heard earlier. This is already commercial property, so there's no issue there. But obviously, any kind of development then would have to go to planning and zoning.
Unless they need a variance or something like that, it doesn't go to planning and zoning. It will have to go through our building permit process. And since it's a commercial development with more than 4 units, it's going to have state fire marshal review. So we'll have to comply with all the fire code. Obviously, we'll have to comply with our building code. But that really, because it's a commercial property, it's really more driven by state fire marshal and their requirements. And then anything that we have regarding parking and things like that, they would have to comply with that before we would issue a building permit. But since it is commercially zoned and multifamily is an allowed use within the commercial zone, they don't need any special land use permit. There would be no reason to go to the Planning Commission.
Great, thank you.
Any other member Norham?
I guess one of the comments made earlier about wanting maintenance and upkeep on that facility that are, building they want to build there. The current structures aren't that great to look at, and I mean, it seems like it would be an upgrade, That's all. I mean, Yeah, support.
And I don't think we necessarily have to send the letter worded exactly like the example they gave, if the Assembly's okay with that. If we vote for this, could the clerk draft up a letter?
Actually, I was going to say we're under communications, and it's not really an action item place.
Right.
So if it sounds like everybody would like to see a letter, how about I draft something and bring it back at the next meeting as an action item?
I think that's what the proposal was when I put this on the agenda, and that does meet their December or November 22nd deadline by a few days.
Yeah.
If I got the correspondence right from...
Well, actually, I think what you're doing is writing in support of their application to Alaska Housing, and Alaska Housing wanted it all in by November 14th, so...
Oh, that's not what it is.
Okay, so the deadline when they decide is November.
I don't know if you send it directly to them, they can stick it on the back of their application, and maybe that'll work for them. But the notification we got was November 14th from Alaska Housing. And then, the 22nd is their deadline, but they could probably, maybe they just stick it in with their application, and that would work. So if that's what you can do, what you can do, right? So
yeah.
Should have put it on as an action item, potentially, but it currently isn't. But Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. But can we send in this letter that we're in support of it, and a more detailed letter would follow?
Yes, I will send an email and let him know that I'm drafting a letter of support, that it will go before the Assembly on the 18th and blah, 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 so he will be in the loop.
Great.
That will give him a little bit of leverage, hopefully, so. Is there any other discussion on that? Okay, we'll move on to the next item under communications, an Assembly letter regarding Ernie Hagen Public Use Area. And that's just a copy of the letter that we agreed to have the clerk draft up and send to Senator Stedman and Representative Christ Tompkins. And I know Senator Stedman's office is anxious to get the letter in their hands. Had a conversation with Bert, and he said as soon as he got the letter, he would talk to the proper departments, state departments. So hopefully we'll get some traction on that and get some help. Any other discussion on that communication? And the next item is Assembly letter regarding humpback whale critical habitat proposed rule. So we have a copy of the letter, and we'll send that off. It sounds like Ketchikan this evening, I believe, they have a meeting. They're going to probably address this as well and support it. And I talked to Mayor Przonka from Wrangell today, and he said they're going to address it, and they think that there needs to be a meeting other than in Southeast, other than just Juneau. So they were going to potentially support, having one meeting in Petersburg as well. So Assembly, if there's no other communications from any other Assembly members, we'll move to Assembly discussion items. Are we all good with that? And the first item there is marine passenger, back up a little bit. Yeah, marine passenger fee funds. An Assembly member, Mucci, wanted this on the agenda, so I would ask what he was looking for in this discussion?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I was just looking for, I don't know if we needed to discuss it at this point, but since then I've talked to Director Cabrera, and she says this is going to be something that's going to be on the agenda for a future PEDC meeting with recommendations hopefully coming from the Marine, for the Visitor Industry Working Group. Is that correct?
Yes.
Are you going to be talking about it?
Okay, so any other thoughts on this marine passenger fees funds? Liz, do you have anything to add, or?
Oh, I'm just trying to sort what Assemblymember Mucci just said.
He could summarize this.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just trying to sort out when and who is going to give us, or who and when we are going to get some recommendations for the marine passenger fee. Will that be coming from the Visitor Industry Working Group to the PEDC, then to us?
So the recommendations from that group are going to go to PEDC. Ultimately, obviously, it's up to the Assembly to decide how to use those funds, whether you want to use them in the way that is in that report or not. That's going to be up to you. Separately, our office sent out a survey to the people who paid into that fund, and we're trying to get some feedback from them on what they think the best use of that money is. and whether hopefully the timing will work out where we can incorporate that into the final report, but if not, we'll have it separately anyway for the Assembly to consider. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Sounds good. Thank you. Any other comments on this discussion item? Okay, moving right along. The next item is Petersburg Petrol Building and Land / Harbor Storage / Harbor Parking. Assembly Member Mucci is looking for the following information: estimated square footage of the Petrol Building the borough may acquire, possible revenue from the land to be leased if the borough acquires the property, how much harbor storage area will be freed up, and / if storage vans are removed, and the increase in harbor parking when / if the vans are removed from the middle harbor. So, Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I asked this from the city manager and the harbor master, and I've been provided that information, and I think the rest of the assembly has it as well, so I'm happy with what I see. Thank you.
Okay, any thoughts? Oh, I'm sure we'll be talking about it more. Next item is adjusting baler hours. And Assembly Member Mucci requested discussion about the possibility of adjusting the baler facility hours so it can be open to the public on Saturday afternoon twice per month. Attached is a report written by then Public Works Director Hagerman in response to Member Mucci's similar request in January of 2018. Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yep, I've talked to Director Cotta about this. He's kind of looking for some numbers for me. I'm just trying to figure out what day of the weekend would be best to be open at the baler facility. Sunday is kind of a busy day for a lot of people who are going to church services and stuff like that, and I was just trying to sort out if Saturday would be a better day for it to be open than Sunday afternoon, so Director Cotta said that he'd get me that information. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess, yeah, if there's a scheduled change, we'll hear about it.
Yep.
Okay, next item is sales tax collection from online purchases. Assemblymember Mucci requests an update on the borough's collection of sales tax on online purchases. Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've had quite a few folks asking me about, they see articles in newspapers or hear reports on the radio about the online sales taxes that are being collected for people purchasing online, and I was just wondering what the borough is doing to capture some of those funds.
Member Tao, or Finance Director Tao, you want to come up here? You can sit up here.
Well, there's not a whole lot we can do because it's voluntary right now. We can't mandate that any online vendor collect and remit sales tax. We have a few large businesses that are doing it. Amazon, we just got notification from Kohl's. I believe they're going to begin to collect and remit sales tax to the borough. But until we have a statewide group that will collect the sales tax as a whole and then remit it to the municipalities, we can't mandate that these companies do that. And I'd like to discuss it more, but I was kind of waiting until after AML because that's going to be discussed quite a bit at that meeting. And I know that I have a few meetings on it as well. I'm going to be up there at the same time for the finance officers conference. So I'd like to report more about it after that.
Okay, yeah, and there is I'm sure everybody's seen the email from Nils Andreasen on from AML, the director, and they're trying to get AML to be the central collected agency.
Yeah, there's been a lot of work on it. There's been bylaws created. There's been a sales tax code created, and it keeps being sent out to municipalities. The attorney's been looking at it. I've been looking at it, making comments, suggestions, sending it back. What I do know is that we think that they'll be able to abide by all of our unique exemptions that we have for each community. So I think that's the only way that we are going to be able to do it. Yeah, by shipping zip code, these databases that they have these days, especially for those large online retailers, they're pretty amazing. And so that's good news because we were a little worried about that they wouldn't be able to do the senior discount or the sales tax cap or any of those other things. So we're pretty optimistic. It's not finalized or anything yet, and the Assembly at some point in time would have to approve to be part of this group But hopefully we're going to have some more information here pretty soon on that. Yeah.
Yeah, looks like it's being vetted quite thoroughly. Any other discussion on that sales tax collection idea? Okay, so we'll move to the next item. Item E, Assemblymember Mucci requests an update on the progression of the visitor industry group. So, Member Mucci?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm just curious if we're still on schedule to have that group wrapped up by Thanksgiving or towards the end of November, and just making sure that we're still headed in that direction.
That's the hope. We're scheduled to meet this week and probably one more time before Thanksgiving, and can only say that we'll be where we are at the end of Thanksgiving, but the idea is to try and wrap things up before the holidays so that before people are scattered all over the place. At that point, when we do have a final draft, that draft would go to the PEDC board for them to review first, just so people are aware. So it might be a little bit before it comes out publicly.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, any questions? Any other questions about that topic? Okay, Borough. Member Moran.
I was wondering about, you contact everybody on the board to be there, right?
Generally, I have a group email that I send out that I reuse, and unfortunately, the last one I used did not have your mother's address on it, and so, but she heard it somewhere else because it was on the radio and contacted me, so I got her on there. I totally apologize. I don't know for reusing. For our fancy software, for some reason, doesn't do group emails very well, so you just kind of reuse an old one, and if you didn't get it right then and you just keep reusing it, it just compounds the error. But I've got her back in there, so she'll get the stuff.
Any other discussion or questions, Liz or Jeff? Okay, we'll move on to next item, F, Borough Communications. Assemblymember Mucci requested discussion about the procedure of signing borough correspondence to ensure the Assembly's position is being accurately represented. Member Mucci?
Yeah, I don't have anything else to say. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have anything else to say on this. We kind of discussed it with that letter to the swell group, and I'm comfortable with the way things are going. Thank you.
Okay. Tariffs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good job.
Tariffs. So, Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I've been contacted by a bunch of cucumber fishermen and one or two processors, and they asked me to, bring up a couple points to them, to the community and to the Assembly. There are 83 geoduck permits in southeast Alaska. There are 257 sea cucumbers in southeast Alaska. There's been a record high prices for sea cucumber limited entry permits that indicate a positive outlook by fishermen about the sea cucumber fishery. Last week we saw 257 divers and 149 boats participating in the fishery. There were 14 to 16 tenders taking care of the product. Grocery stores, fuel docks, insurance companies, fishing supply stores all benefit from these fisheries. The participants in the sea cucumber fishery have been harvesting sea cucumbers in southeast Alaska in years past through the end of November and sometimes into mid-December. Because of the tariff and the trade war that's going on, processing the sea cucumbers in Petersburg is over as of last week. The local co-op in Petersburg employs 15 to 19 people who are now unemployed as of last week. The local co-op was trying to purchase 300,000 pounds of sea cucumbers this year, with 35,000 pounds to domestic markets. And they were planning to ship the 265,000 pounds to China and foreign markets, but the 62% tariffs in place, these markets have disappeared as no one will pay the high tariff, even with the high demand for southeast cucumber. The tariff battle between the U.S. and China does not just affect the farmers in the Midwest who are getting subsidies from our federal government to help offset these tariffs. It has a big impact in small communities in Alaska who depend on these fisheries to carry them through the year. So the next time you hear the word tariff or trade wars in the news, you can think about our friends and neighbors in town who will be out of work in a week or so because a policy is being implemented back east. So, yep, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. It's we've got one relative and numerous friends that work in that industry, and they were scrambling last week to look for a market because they didn't have one in Petersburg anymore. And sounds like Sitka Sound took them on, so hopefully that, unfortunately, we probably lose the raw fish tax and revenue to the stores and fuel docks, et cetera, like Member Mucci mentioned. So if there's no other assembly discussion items, it moves us to recognitions. Is there any recognitions? Okay, I have none. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. Second? I can't second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. We're adjourned.